My job was to recruit spies, find foreign officials that are willing to provide secrets, collect foreign intelligence, and run covert action at the direction of the president. If you don't do this right, you are going to swing from the bottom of a crane, and I'm not guessing. I used to capture and torture people, and now for whatever reason, I'm not doing that anymore. I have never talked as publicly about these things as we have.
I love this because I had a guy in the comments say, if Cox was interviewing Jesus Christ, he'd start off with, "Where were you born?" The comments are great.
Yeah, well, it's fair, right?
Yeah.
I like I said in the exchange, I love a good origin story. I think find out where someone's from, and it tells a lot about where they are and where they're going.
Yeah,
why they're there.
Yeah. I always, because obviously I interview mostly criminals. Like, I like to hear, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, sometimes it's like, hey, I was raised raised next to the projects. My parents were in and out of jail. I was raised by my grandma. whatever that story is. Yeah. And you're like, oh God, this guy he didn't have a chance. You know. And then you've got the other guys. I was raised upper middle class. My dad was a stockbroker. My mom was a doctor. And you're like, Jesus, how did you end up robbing banks? Right. So that's to me that's interesting.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes it's like, okay, this is almost preordained. Like, I don't know how you're getting out of this situation. Yeah. And other people, it's like, the fuck are you doing?
How did this happen?
Yeah.
Well, I love it. So you say you usually interview criminals, and I would say, well, you are again. Yeah. Depending on perspective, right? I always say, hey, in America, I'm a patriot, but there's a lot of countries that would consider a lot of what I did criminal activity. Oh, yeah. We're one of the people that are trained to go overseas and break foreign laws. Yeah. That's just the business.
Yeah, I was going to say, when I interviewed, we talked about him earlier, Bustamante, is that he's always like, well, the difference is that what's interesting, he always says, what's interesting about my story is that he's like, I had somebody give me a passport, give me an identity, give me all these things. He's like, where you had to figure out, how can I steal someone's identity, obtain all their documents, convince the State Department to give me it, or first go get an ID from the DMV in their name, then convince the State Department to give me a passport in their name. Like, I had to go through all those, and he's like, to me, I've got like a team of guys that sets this whole thing up.
You did it the hard way,
right?
I've got a secretary that books appointments for me,
right?
And I go in, and the hardest thing is, gosh, how long is this going to take? And you're dealing with the bureaucracy, but you don't have that. Am I going to get caught? Yeah. At least not when you're getting the things issued. Maybe when you're using it and how you're, But
I was going to say it because I've had that conversation too, where it's like, to me, if I get caught in the bank, I get handcuffed, I go to jail. If you're on foreign soil and you get caught in the wrong place, like, you'd be lucky to go to jail and be prosecuted. You may not be coming back,
Well, I was going to say, of course, it's how you get your documents is a little bit of the spicy part for us. Once we get the documents, that's just a ticket to the movie. Right. And then you take it overseas and you do your thing, and you're absolutely right. I mean, you get caught over there's big boy. Yeah. Big boy. And the least of what you'd be concerned about is some handcuffs and Miranda rights. I mean, there's other ramifications for these kind of things.
Right. So, well, let's start with like we said, where were you born?
Yeah, so I was born in Ohio.
Okay.
Born on a farm in Ohio.
All right.
My dad was a vocational agriculture teacher, FFA, and my mom was a secretary.
All right.
So I was
gonna say, were you? So you were what, trying to get out of that, or were you thinking when you grew up you were going to be a farmer? Or
no, listen, it sounds crazy when I say it out loud, but people have heard me say it before, so I'll say it again. I was born into this life. I was put on earth to be an intelligence officer, and every time I tried to deviate from it, I was pushed back into it. And this life chose me. I didn't choose it.
Right.
And whether it was because I grew up as a fan of Jedi over the dark side, or whether it was because I supported G.I. Joe over Cobra, or because, it was Ronald Reagan, not the Soviets, whatever it was, I always had this sense of right and wrong and knew that I was going to go into the military and knew I was going to go into service. And even when I was in elementary school looking up books on intelligence, and back then there weren't any books on intelligence. Right. People didn't write books like this. And certainly if they did, they weren't in an elementary school library in a farming town in Ohio. Right. And so, but it was just, I've always been interested. And have never deviated from the path. Yeah, ironically enough.
When I grew up, my internet was the Britannica. We had my mom had bought in the whole, 100 books of the Britannica. Mm-hmm. What a mess that was. Just trying to find something.
Remind me to tell you how I became Middle East specialist. By the way, you'll appreciate that story.
Okay, so at some point you graduate, high school. Like, I mean, did you know? Because I've interviewed FBI agents. Yeah. And whatever, different law enforcement, and sometimes there's a clear path. Like, like I had an FBI. I had a guy that was an FBI agent that had spoken with an FBI agent. He was like, listen, he was like, I would love to be FBI. He's like, here's what you do.
Yep.
He's like, there's only like three paths that'll help you get directly in if you have a chance.
Yep.
And he gave it to him, and he followed one of them.
That's exactly it. Now,
okay.
I don't know if looking at me, you probably are surprised I didn't go this path, but my first choice, I was going to go replace Joe Montana and be an NFL quarterback, obviously. And so at some point I had a high school coach that reminded me, he goes, hey, not for nothing, you're a 5'9" white kid that runs a 4.7 40. Right. You guys are two dozen for a dime. And so when Ohio State didn't come calling for a football scholarship or, shockingly enough, right, I had a great ROTC instructor, junior ROTC instructor in high school. He said, kid, what do you want to do? And I said, listen, I either want to work for the agency or the bureau, right? CIA or FBI. So he grabbed me up, took me down to the guidance counselor's office and said, got into the phone book, look for CIA, because that was my first choice. Well, he couldn't find CIA in the phone book. So he calls the FBI. He finds the FBI office in Dayton, calls him. I got a kid here who wants to go to the FBI. What's he have to do to get into the FBI? And they said he's got to get a degree. Military service is great. And he can either be a lawyer, an accountant, or whatever, yada, yada. And as soon as he said military service is a way to get there, done, sold. My dad served in Vietnam. My grandfathers both, one of them fought in World War II in the Pacific. The second one was National Guard. We fought in a lot of different conflicts, and so that was always very strong for me as well. And so my career, what I had chosen outside of the NFL, which didn't choose me, military, college, FBI or CIA.
Right.
And
that
was
your college degree in?
My college degree. Okay, so I enlisted. I always joke I did so well in high school that I got to enlist in the Navy, and so I said, well, I'm going to go into the service. If I want to go, I want to fight. This was the early '90s. Gulf War was over. Balkans hadn't started, but I knew I didn't want to go into the military and be a cook or something like that. So I originally was going to enlist in the Marines, and golly, Ned, the Navy recruiter showed me this video. He said, let me tell you about these guys you may not have heard of. He said the SEAL program. So I watched the video and I'm like, oh, done. That's exactly what I want to do. I looked over the part that I wasn't a very good swimmer, which as it turns out was a thing, and that I wasn't a very good runner. I was a sprinter, but not a runner, which was also a thing. So I enlisted in the Navy, went through the program, went to BUD/S, was into the halfway through Hell Week, and voluntarily dropped, became a law enforcement specialist, was what they were doing with a lot of us that dropped. And that's how I ended up in the Middle East as a Middle East specialist.
Okay.
People ask me, my whole career was on the Middle East, and they say, how did you become a Middle East specialist? I say, well, I was really bad at geography. So what? Well, I graduated law enforcement academy, and I called the guy that gives us jobs, and everyone was going cool places, right? Rhoda or Sigonella or Iceland, Reykjavik, cool places. I call him up, and he says, hey, I've got Guantanamo Bay, or I've got Manama. I'm like, I know where Guantanamo is. I don't know where Manama is. I hand the phone to my buddy. My buddy picks up the phone, said, I'll take Manama. I said, all right, hand it back. I said, I'll take Manama. He goes, hey, where's Manama? I'm like, I don't know. I think it's somewhere in Central America. So we go down to the base library, pull up the encyclopedia. We go past Managua, which in fact is in Central America, to Manama, which is the capital of Bahrain, which we just volunteered to go to the Persian Gulf.
All right.
I went over there, loved it, ended up staying there 2 years, and that's, was my basis in the Middle East was because I was really bad at geography. But then I'm leaving. I had some good friends in NCIS, Naval Criminal Investigative Service. I said, kid, what do you want to do? Well, I love being overseas. I said, man, I want to work for the agency. And they said, okay. What are you going to study in college? I said, hey, I'm going to study Russian. I think that's the thing. And they're like, hey, it's 1997. I don't know if you've been following the news, but that whole Soviet Union thing's done. You know what we don't have is people who are experts in China. I said, well, I don't know anything about China. They said, neither does anybody else. So to answer your question,
that's not good.
So what
these are horrible. These are horrible reasons.
Listen.
To choose career.
Listen. So I go back to school and I get my undergrad in political science and East Asian studies with a focus on China.
Oh, that's perfect then.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
So I learned Chinese. Learned all about Chinese military strategy. I was Mr. China. I joined the agency in July of 2001.
So out of college,
yeah,
you just go apply? Did they have a guy?
No, man, that's not the way. Yeah.
I was going to say.
No, not at all. So when I was in school, I interned at the Department of State. And it was really clear, in the government, like a lot of jobs, there's tribes that you fit in and tribes you don't. And I wasn't a State Department guy. God bless them. Great people, not my jam. But I parlayed my State Department internship into an internship with the Department of Defense where I was teaching people how to sell weapons. That was more along my lines, foreign military assistance and all that. Parlayed that into an internship with the FBI. While I was at FBI, I was contacted by some people at the agency because of a program I was working on related to my study in school. But at the same time, John McLaughlin was just appointed Deputy Director CIA. And John McLaughlin, great guy, was an career analyst, but he was an alumni of my little school, Wittenberg University in Ohio. And so I got a call from the alumni office. They said, hey, you're in D.C., you are a national security guy. We just had an alumnus get appointed to be Deputy Director CIA. Do you want to go interview him? I said, absolutely.
Do you want to interview him?
Him, for the alumni magazine.
Oh, just for the magazine. Okay.
Just for the magazine. Just for the magazine.
Yeah.
And being an opportunistic guy, I said,
fell in your lap.
Oh,
yeah.
Absolutely. So I go over to CIA headquarters. I talk to him. And I had been elected the president of our student body, our student senate, not our senior class, but student senate.
How old are you at this point?
Oh, hell, I'm 22. So when I went back to school, I played football at school, and they used to call me, I usually don't have very good nicknames, but this was a pretty good one. They called me Old Navy because I'd been in the Navy before, and then, was back playing football. So I'm a little bit older, 22, 23. So I'm interviewing him, talking to him, and what a great guy. First off, just what a tremendous guy. And so the interview's sort of wrapping up. It's 15 minutes, and he asked me a few questions about myself, but not too much. We talked about him and his career, and then he says, "Well," and I said, "Man, what a great honor to be able to talk to you." He said, "Do you want to get a cup of coffee?" I said, "Yeah,
do I?
Of course." So 45 minutes later, I told him, I said, "Really, I kind of want to end up here," and he said, "Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing." Calls over his EA and says, "Hey, get this kid's information. Let's see what we can do." And I had already had an application started. And it was fascinating. And I said, "Hey," and again, we've talked about it before. You can imagine what you'd have done the exact same thing. I went ahead and pitched him. And I said, "Hey, if I can get you selected to be our senior class speaker, would you come back and speak at commencement?" And he said, "Yeah, I'd be open to that." So I went back to school and started my first successful covert action operation to get him elected to be our commencement speaker. So I'm going through the application process and whatever, and sure enough, he senior class is like, "Absolutely, how cool is this?"
All right.
And again, this was back when CIA was, this was late. It was in 2000. It was before any, we'd passed the period of controversy and hadn't quite got to the period of controversy post 9/11 about a few things. We select him. He comes back. University of President, who I'd worked for in college, said, "Hey, you know the guy. Why don't you help organize the visit?" And I'm like, "I don't really know the guy. I met the guy, but okay, fine." So I don't think much about it. As he's coming in, I'm standing there with the president, and Mr. McLaughlin, God bless him, throws his arm around me and goes, "Hey, how are you doing?" Like we're old beer drinking buddies. "Come sit with me." And I don't know how much of this I should say, but I'll say it. He's like, "Why don't you come sit at the head of the table with me?" So like the vice provost got knocked off the head of the table, and there I am sitting there. And everyone's like, "What the hell is going on?" We go up and go up to the buffet line. He leans over and says, "Hey, what's going on with your application?" I said, "Hey, it's going well, but I'm stuck in security." He goes, "Okay, I'll make some calls. I'll get back to you." I'm like, all right, he's just a good guy. He's just shucking and jiving.
Yeah.
That night we go out to dinner with him at the club, at the university club. And again, I'm helping him navigate. He's doing a colloquium, and there's some students who are going to ask some silly questions, and I sort of point out, here's who they are and here's what they're going to ask. And anybody who's listening to this will laugh about in college because they know I was conservative and whatever. But anyway, so we navigate all that. We go to dinner. He pulls me into the coat closet. He said, "Hey, I made some calls." I was like, "No shit." He says, "Yeah." He said, "You're going to get a call on Monday from the head of security. He's going to talk about where your application is." I said, "Okay." Again, not thinking anything. And he was great. Awesome. Well, comes Monday, I get a call from the head of security. Not like some dude who worked in security, like the director of security who says, "What's going on?" I explained where it was. He goes, "Okay." A week later, I was through the security review. And I'd already done all the needful. I mean, it didn't bypass anything. It was just stuck up in an adjudication because of some issues. And so I'm in. And I always joked about that like I got basically brought in by the deputy director, and people are like, "No, that's not
how it's done."
That's not how it's done.
Yeah.
And two times, when I first started, I was at the Christmas party, right? So July, I get in with a big Christmas party, director, deputy director down there. One of my classmates goes through and gets his picture taken with the deputy director, and he says, "Hey, one of your classmates is Charles. How's he doing?" And the guy immediately hits me up and says, "Hey, this guy was asking me about you. What the hell?" And I was like, "Oh, I never really mentioned it." So I went down and talked to him. And then my first posting abroad, I was telling my chief, I said, "Hey, the deputy," told him this story, and my first chief was like, "Yeah, sure, kid. Yeah, I'm sure that's how it happened." And so I was at a place, and the director and the deputy director came out, and deputy director walks by, and we're just in a crowd. And I said, "Sir," and he looks at me, he throws his arm around me and said, "I wonder what happened to you." And my boss is saying, what in the hell is going on here? So anyway, that's a really long story for a short piece about how'd you get in.
Yeah.
I was lucky. I was in the right time at the right place doing the right things, and I just got lucky. I found a good guy, and he looked out for me, and I got in.
Right. So, yeah, I was just thinking, like, I'm sure that didn't hurt at all with your boss or anybody else.
No,
that
no.
knew
I mean,
that.
it was,
Yeah.
I'd been in the military, and I'd served overseas, and I was Phi Beta Kappa, and I'd done all this. I'd done all the things to put myself in the right position, but still,
Yeah.
who am I?
It's still pretty cool to be, the guy that the deputy director is like, "What's going on, bro?" Like,
and again,
your boss is like, "He didn't fucking know my name." Like,
exactly.
What's what is happening?
Yeah, and I'm 100% sure he's like, "Yeah, this kid's full of shit." Yeah, I'm sure. Great story, bro. I bet that's really how it happened. I'm like, I don't know. Like I told you, I'm not smart enough to make this stuff up. I'm just like Forrest Gump here. It just kind of fell in my lap.
So so you ended up. So, okay. So wait a minute. So where did you end up? What am I missing here? Like you at this point, you end up going where? Did you go to the Middle East?
Yeah. So funny story, right? So everyone who knows the U.S. government's going to laugh. So when I was a kid, right, went to the Middle East on accident.
Right.
Became a Middle East guy. Went to college and thoughtfully studied China.
Right. So
right, because China's going to be the next thing. But then I joined the CIA in July of 2001.
Okay.
Right. So September 11th happens. I'm a young single military age male with experience in the Middle East.
Yeah.
So wallahi, next thing you know, there was a few steps in between. I can't necessarily say where I was right out of the chute, but I went to training. I got sent on a first assignment. I was one of the first guys out of the field because of some situations, and I was just saluted and said, "Hey, I'll go wherever you want me to." It wasn't where I wanted to go, but it turned out to be a great job. And then when the war in Iraq kicked off in March of 2003, they were looking for volunteers, and I raised my hand. I said, "I'm in. We're at war.
Right.
I'm at war. I mean, this is what I joined for." So I went to the Middle East, spent a couple of years there very quickly, and then from there they sent me and I learned Persian, and from there on out I was a Middle East guy.
Okay. So what are you doing there? I mean, is it intercepts? Is it, I always think of the CIA guys as going into these little towns and trying to dump a bunch of money onto some warlord to get him to agree to, what I'm saying? Fight
listen,
battle,
Matt, I can't get into details.
Yeah.
I mean, the wheels of democracy are lubricated with all kinds of things. Yeah. And let's just say I was a lubricant applicator, if you will. How you like that? That's pretty good, lubricant applicator. I was a case officer.
Right.
I was an operations officer. When people think of intelligence officers and CIA spies, we always joke, right? Jack Ryan was an analyst. Well, analysts don't do what Jack Ryan did.
Right.
That's what I did.
That's what makes it
That's
cool.
what makes it cool. And what makes a guy like me cool is that's what I did, but I don't think it's exceptional. But no, I was an operations officer. I was a case officer. My job was to recruit spies, which means, find foreign officials that are willing to provide secrets, and it's usually exchange for money. So I would recruit foreign spies. I would collect foreign intelligence and run covert action at the direction of the president. When we have covert action, case officers and people like us, there's other supporting elements that help. We conduct that covert action to covertly influence foreign events to support the U.S.
I was going to say, it's funny. You don't think it's you don't think it's spectacular because a fish doesn't know it's surrounded by water. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like you're in the environment. It doesn't seem that odd. Typically when I interview like a criminal or something, and he's like, so this and that happened, and then this guy told, and then they indicted me, and then I got arrested, so I was in prison. And you're like, whoa. Like you tell him one guy about getting arrested, so but But to the guy that's driving a forklift that's listening to this, that's
Yeah.
never been arrested, I'm like, I know they didn't knock on your door and say, hey, could you come downtown?
Right.
Like, I'm like, what happened with the arrest? They're
Right.
like, oh,
Right.
bro, they came in like, there were like 40 guys. They had machine guns. They kicked in my front door. You're just like, right, okay. So,
Right.
but
No,
to
and
another guy, you don't think it's weird. It doesn't seem strange.
No, and I'll tell you, there were probably a handful of times in my career where something's happening, and in the moment, you're looking around like, I'm it?
Yeah.
I'm negotiating with this president of this other country or with this whatever to do something that is, I'm collecting this and I'm going to report that I know is a war and peace or someone's going to die because we've received this information. I'm like, surely there must be an adult in the room somewhere. And you
Right.
look around and it's just you. And you're like, so I mean, yeah, day in, day out, if you say the things that you do, it sounds ridiculous to say.
Yeah.
But certainly there were even times in the moment that you recognize the gravity of the situation and you're like, no, there's got to be some other adults doing this. Or, you do something and I'm thinking, man, if my mom knew what I was doing right now, I don't think she'd be very happy. What kind of life choices have taken me to this position right now? I'll tell you one of those is one of my favorites. My wife, who I'm, going through a process of being divorced with, but, it's aside from the point. So we're in a country overseas, right? And I have found a guy, and
This is not,
yeah, it's a guy with
Yeah.
some stuff, right?
Yeah.
So he's got access to a place,
right.
and
Wow.
yeah, I'm real specific here, real specific. And so he's got the keys in his hand. The keys that he's got in his hand is a place that we want to be in, right? And yeah. And so. Long story short, we've been through a lot of different things. And so I pick up his keys and I'm holding them in my hand. And he says, listen, and with this other name that was a completely made up name, no backstopping, no nothing. I just met this guy on the street and shucked and jived and we got to where we were. I said, well, listen, I've got an envelope full of money in my pocket for these keys. I'm going to take these keys to the bathroom and I'm going to make a copy of them. And this guy says, listen, bullshit made up name.
All right.
If you think you're walking, I'm one of a handful of people with these keys. If you walk out of here and disappear, I'm dead.
Right.
He said, so you're not going anywhere without me. I said, all right, let's go. And so here I am. I'm wearing a trench coat. And it's funny, right? Because we always joke about spies and trench coats and all this stuff. But I did because I was going after the keys at that particular meeting. I'm wearing a trench coat around that weighs about 90 pounds because I've got things in there to make a copy of the key. I've got a tripod. I've got mensuration. I can measure a camera, all this stuff. Clink, 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 clink when I'm walking around. So we go into the bathroom of this. Ultimately, it was a Turkish restaurant. And I'm in a suit. And he's in, his appropriate business attire. And I'm on my knees in the same bathroom stall as this guy is with the door shut. And I'm on my knees looking up at him. And he's saying, hurry up. And I'm saying, shut up. And I'm trying to make some copies and do some stuff with the keys. And it was in that moment where I'm like, what brought me to the place where I'm on my knees in a bathroom stall with the guy who's yelling at me, hurry up, and I'm yelling at him, shut up. And then we walk out and these Turkish guys are just snickering like, I don't know what was going on in there, but it sounded kind of funny. And ultimately, I only say that because that was one of those like, what kind of life decisions have brought me to this moment right now? And then, of course, I'm thinking, wait, am I going to be able to expense the cleaning bill for my suit because I'm on my knees in this bathroom stall? I'm certainly going to send it to the cleaners. And then the other piece was, that was a Marine Corps ball that night. I don't know if you know much about Marine Corps ball and when you're overseas. Dude, the Marine Corps balls are it. You put a tuxedo on, the Marines, once a year, Marine Corps birthday. It is the event of the year. And so I get home, and of course I'm late, as I'm always am. My wife doesn't know where I am because I can't tell her. What are you doing? I'm working. Well, the Marine Corps ball's tonight. I've got a gown. It's a big fancy thing. So as I'm walking in the door, she's pissed, as she is most of the time at me, or was, and is, and whenever. So she's like, I'm going.
Right.
I'm like, all right, well, I got to get my tuxedo on and everything. And I'm like, are you going to wait? And she's like, no, I'm not. And so so I'm like, all right, well, whatever. Well, what were you doing? Working. Okay, fine. I'm going. Fine. So I jump in the shower, throw my tuxedo on, do all that stuff, and go to the ball. By the time I get there, of course, she's doing shots with Marines and, whatever. It's fine. But all my guys are huddled around me like, hey, how'd it go? Because, a couple of them knew what I was doing. I was like, oh, man, we got the thing and did the thing and blah, blah, blah. And my wife's like, what the hell is going on? And I'm like, I did a thing and I was working. Then we ended up having a great night. But I guess that's 2 or 3 stories right there. 1, I can't believe I was in the opportunity to do that kind of thing.
Right.
2, that's the nature of it.
Right.
I may be a fish in the water, but generally if someone's like, what are you doing? I'm a fish in the water. Awesome. What kind of water? Water. What kind of fish? A fish. Who are you swimming with? Another fish. Anyway, what are you talking about?
Right. So
that's the life,
I was gonna say that seems lonely. Like it seems like you have nobody to confide in, or can you only confide? Can you even confide in other people that are in the agency? Because
it's interesting, right? So for us, if you're doing it right, it's the people that you work with. My best friends are still the people I work with because they know. Not my wife, not my family, not my, not people on the outside because they're good friends, but you don't have that commonality.
Right.
You don't look at them and say, well, I remember that time that, we got shot at or we collected this information and this happened and that happened and this ended up in a detainee or whatever. Nobody else really, you can explain the stories, but it just doesn't resolve. And so, it's tough on a marriage. And so, we used to say when you're overseas, if you're doing your job right, you have agents that you're running, you have people that you're working on, you have targets. You don't have friends. Who's got time for friends? You've got work. Yeah, you've got work and you've got work, your family, but you don't have friends. If you're doing it right, you don't have friends.
Yeah, I was gonna say you have a pissed off wife, and you have a pissed off wife.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Big time. Big time. Yeah, I was horrible to my wife, particularly at the beginning, because I didn't think I could tell her anything.
Right.
As I got a little more mature and a little more experienced, I realized, okay, I can tell her a few more things. But oh man, okay, I'll give you another good one. This is a funny one. So she was giving me a hard time because I was out all night a lot of times. The good stuff doesn't happen at lunch.
Right.
And the good stuff doesn't happen over breakfast.
Right.
Right. The good stuff happens at night. And you may come home smelling like, strippers and glitter. And you're working. Of course I'd rather be home.
See, baby, I was working.
I'm working. Of course I'd rather be home. You think I wanted to be out there drinking all those martinis and eating that steak and getting lap dances? No, I wanted to be home.
It's this work. It's horrible.
It's horrible. So somebody's got to do it. It's horrible. I've got liver damage, but hey, it's a silent injuries. So I'm out all night and she's like, why do you have to be out all night? And I said, well, because I'm doing this thing. Every once in a while you have to meet somebody in a hotel, whatever. And so, I was an asshole. Can I curse?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I do have a quick question. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And real quick, like, does she realize a lot of times you'll hear, and this is movies, bro, like I don't know shit. But like the wife will think they work for like the State Department. Like they think they have a low level job of this. They know this guy works for the CIA.
They know.
Okay.
They
cool.
know. Because at the end of the day, your support network is the other wives and spouses. Right. Because they're the only other people that understand. You can't go to a State Department, you can't go to another government agency person and say, well, isn't your husband out all night? Because they're not.
Right.
That's just not what happens. So the one time, man, I was such a jerk too. It was horrible. I told her, I was like, fine, you don't want me to be out all night? Fine. I'll tell you what, I'll have the other guy rent the room. And if I walk in there and it's an ambush and he kills me, that'll be on you. Because I was an idiot, right? And so fast forward, of course, you can imagine how this is going to go. So fast forward, probably about the next time I was out. I'm out. I'm in a meeting. It is awesome. It's killing it. Guys, just, keys to the kingdom, man. I'm just taking notes. By the time I look up, I don't know, it's dawn. Maybe it's 8, maybe it's 9. It's whatever time, because you don't stop.
Right.
Guy's giving you the goods, and he's got time, and you've got time. That's what you're doing. So, man, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling great. So I finally break out, go back, and this is years ago, of course, and get to where I can get my phone, turn my phone back on, and I've got like 97 messages. And then I get all these calls, and like, hey, what are you doing? Where are you? Blah, blah, blah. And by that time, my wife has called everybody. My real boss, my pretend boss, all these different people, like, where's he at? And finally someone was like, he's fine. They didn't,
Yeah, they don't say, but he's fine. Right. He's doing something.
And so I get home and she's like, you asshole. What did you do? I thought you were dead. I thought that da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, and of course I'm on cloud nine. I'm like, no, I had a great meeting. And she's like, you're such an asshole. And yeah, it happens.
Right.
But anyway. Yeah, no, it's a tough life. Because you can't explain that.
Yeah.
You can't explain that.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say too, like, so let's say you put in a bunch of work, right? You talk to some guy that works for their version of, some country's version of the State Department. He's handing over information.
Right.
He's saying, look, these nuclear weapons are filled with water. They don't even work. The boosters are they're made of cardboard.
Yep.
Like, whatever. He's telling you a bunch of stuff. And then, and you've got a bunch of actionable information, and you're thinking, I'm going to give this to my boss. He's going to give it to so-and-so. And 2 weeks from now, we're going to find out that this happened. How often do those types of things happen? And then suddenly nothing ever happens.
Oh,
you know what I'm saying? Because I can imagine, to me, it's like being a cop. Like kids, young men daydream of being a cop, and they're in car chases and they're pulling their guns. And the truth is, most cops never pull their gun. They never fire their gun. There's never a car chase. There's never, and it's kind of, boring, and you're sitting on the side of the road and you're going here and you're meeting your buddies. And so, it's disappointing. So I can imagine being in the CIA where it's there's tons of information being gathered, but very seldomly do they act on that information. It's more gathering it and giving it to somebody to try and negotiate a deal and have the inside track. But like, how often does that happen where nothing happens? Or maybe something happens. Like, something happens, you say whatever, and then 3 weeks later you're watching the news and go, holy shit.
Yeah. That's a great question. It's a great question, and I think it's a really sophisticated question, because you're absolutely right. Sophisticated.
Did you hear that?
He's a sophisticant over here. Yeah. No, that and it's like a dude question, right? Because in real dude world, well, even if you're a dude, you're only a dude once in a great while. You're not a dude all the time. This isn't Jason Bourne or James Bond, where you go from gunshot to car chase to fist fight to making love to the supermodel to. No, we were actually joking.
And still get back to the poker table.
Oh,
and
of course.
Look amazing.
And look great. Yeah, at one point I want James Bond to show up disheveled and sweaty because he had to do a whole big thing to make sure he wasn't followed before he got to whatever he was going to do. But he doesn't, right? He drives his nice car up and parks. We were joking about the other day, the most realistic espionage movie you could possibly make would be, like the opening scene from Mission Impossible or James Bond, where it's like an action scene.
Right.
And then the next 2 hours, he's just sitting at a desk writing reports.
Right.
Like at minute 47, he gets up and gets some coffee and sits back down and just keeps. That would be the most accurate portrayal ever. No, look, if you're doing your job and you're taking the right assignments and you're in the right places, you're going to pivot U.S. policy. There's going to be times where you're going to come back and be like, man, this is it. And there's going to be times where you're going to come back and say, this is it. And absolutely nothing happens. Because, here's the thing, right? Just because you have exquisite, perfect intelligence doesn't mean that fits with the political narrative. Right. Doesn't mean that policymakers are going to look at it and go, aha, what I really wanted to do was this, but now I've got that piece of information, so we're going to do that. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Now, the closest to that is when you're in a war zone or working on CT information and you get that piece of information, and then there's an effects on the space and someone's removed from the battlefield.
Right.
I mean, that's fairly dramatic.
Yeah.
And, 20 years we worked, that did not happen. There's a military raid based on the information you've provided, or there's a strike based on the information you've provided. But no, the vast majority of time, it just all fits into the bigger puzzle.
Right.
Right. And whether you're the linchpin of that piece, or whether you're just one tile on a greater mosaic, or whether your tile, even though it's really important, gets discarded because maybe it doesn't fit the story that they're trying to tell, or you got it just too late or too early. And you just have to be satisfied. Like the whole job, dude. The whole job, you have to know what you're doing, and you're doing it for the country, and you're doing it for but you're doing it for your parents, and you're doing it for your friends. And we always say, hey, if you wanted applause, join the circus.
Yeah,
that's not what we do.
I was gonna say, it's just like, to me, it's like the equivalent of being a guy on the assembly line who's putting the door on the Ford, but you never get to see it. You never get to drive it. You never get to see it come off the line. This is my piece. It's the oh God, I always love this. I love this saying where it's there were the two stonemasons.
Yeah.
You ever heard that? That there's two stonemasons, and an architect walks by and says to the one stonemason, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm cutting these stones into blocks." And he's the other one. He says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm on a team that's building a cathedral." Yeah. Like he can see the verb. I always love that. Like he's got. I'll bet you that makes his job so much easier than this guy that just thinks he's cutting up stones.
100%. Look, so one, yes, you've got to understand you're building cathedrals.
Right.
Right. You are protecting America. Now, your job in protecting America may be, like you said, put the door handle on today, or it may be design the safety, the airbag, or whatever. And there's times where you may build the whole car.
Right.
And maybe it was your idea from start to finish, and it's awesome. Almost never. I mean, it's a team sport. No matter what you're doing, you're getting support or whatever, and oftentimes you're just one piece of the puzzle. But I think the biggest difference there is, so Ford launches the car. Ford makes a lot of money, and you all throw a party afterwards, and everybody celebrates, and everybody gets recognition and all that kind of stuff. That's the biggest part I think that's different of what we did. You do it because of the 10 guys whose opinion, or gals, I say guys, but whatever. The 10 people in the agency whose opinion you actually care about know what you did. And when you have that drink, you kind of look at each other like, yep. And that's it.
Yeah.
You don't get a ribbon. You don't get a parade. You don't get a write-up in the paper. And then you go on to do the next thing. And then you go on to do you don't even stop. Now you just go on to do the next thing. And the next thing and the next thing. And that's just, and you've got to be able to, you got to be able to live with that.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's. Did you ever see the movie Argo?
Oh yeah,
I love that fucking movie. My favorite line is when he says when the director or whoever they're talking to, he pitches the idea of going in there with the film crew, pretending they're a film crew, and he says, "Is this the best idea you have?" And he goes, "No, sir." He said, "This is." He said, "We don't have any good ideas. They're all bad ideas." And he said, "But this is the best bad idea we have."
Oh, yeah.
And he's like that's the pitch. I got nothing but bad, but this is the best bad one.
Yeah.
And then of course at the end when they sneak him out, like you can't say nothing.
So
and you're going to get a medal. And he's like, "Oh, I'm getting a medal." Well, we're going to
take it back. Yeah. No, listen.
What the fuck is going on?
Argo is perfect for about 3 different points that we've just made. One, who is the hero of the story? Tony Mendez, right? Ben Affleck. Right. They wrote out the entire character of the case officer that was with him that ran that operation.
Oh, okay.
Because that's not what we do. So it was Tony Mendez, right? Tony Mendez was the hero. Well, literally, in fact, there was a case officer there that was handling a lot of that, and Tony was kind of a support guy.
Yeah.
But our case officer was completely written out of the story. And we're okay with that because that's what we do. So that's one. 2, that culminating scene where they're running down the runway, and
of course,
they're chasing them and all that stuff.
Dramatized.
Right. And the reason why that's dramatized is you can't accurately convey when you're crossing a border with false documents in a country where that's a death offense. You can't convey.
Look,
you can't
goosebumps.
You can't convey the stress and the sweat running down your back and that's it.
Right.
You can't convey that in a movie, right? And I'm just laughing because it gives me chill bumps because just reliving that scenario and having been there several times, it doesn't convey to an audience. So you've got to have a chase.
Yeah.
But real dudes know if you've ever been there, if you've ever crossed a really hostile border, and I don't even know why I'm lowering my voice because now it's getting good. If you've ever crossed a border like that in other documents where you had there's no diplomatic cover, there's no phone a friend, you're going to go to big boy. You got big boy problems if you get screwed up. You can't convey that. Because it looks boring. Because you hand him your passport and he looks at you and you look at him and he asks you a question, you answer it correctly and he stamps it and you move on.
Well, it's the movies too. Like they dramatize the whole scene when they're calling.
Yeah.
They keep stopping him and he's walking back to the office and the phone's ringing. You can hear it ringing. You're like, "Oh my God." They did an amazing job though.
Yeah. A great movie.
Yeah,
great story. It's rare that we get to trumpet our successes like that. And it's great.
Oh shoot, I had a question too. All right, I had something too. So what was I going to tell you was oh gosh,
Did you like that on command? I almost could get my chill bumps up.
That's nice. And because it's funny, I've had some of my charges are passport fraud because I've used It's not a false passport. It was issued to me by the State Department.
Right.
But not my name.
Yeah.
And I've gone through passport control.
Yeah.
You know, people are like, weren't you scared? Weren't you worried? I really wasn't, because it was a real ID. It was a real,
Yeah.
passport. So
Yeah.
I wasn't concerned.
Yeah.
And even if I get caught, I'm going to get arrested and go back to the United States. Not that I wanted to, but nobody's going to put me in a chair and beat me until, you know what I'm saying? Like, I got no concern about my safety.
Right. Yeah. I think that was the first time. I don't know. Even if I'd like to think I was fairly sophisticated when I joined the agency, and had understood what the job was about. But I guess I was always in the impression that, well, at the end of the day, you've got immunity, and if it's real bad, it's going to be bad. But you're going to catch a beating, but then you're going to get to go home. And then for me, in what I was doing, you realize, no, that's not the way it works. Diplomatic immunities, if you're diplomatically posted to a country and you're all that stuff. When you do all the other things and you're traveling to other places and other names and other blah, 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 there's no protection.
Right.
I mean, we're Americans, but at the end of the day, there's no protection.
Yeah, they might swap you out in 2 years when they got a couple of their guys they want back.
And again, but that's life.
Right.
I can remember some of the hardest people, frankly, some of the hardest times, the hardest encounters I had were in the U.S. Coming back into the country after successfully completing an operation overseas and using different documents and getting pulled into secondary. And having to explain to a U.S. customs person. Right. Another time, just because it's a funny story, right? So I'm flying on U.S. military air when I'm in the war zone. And, of course, I'm a civilian. I've got a beard. I've got an M4. And, clearly I'm not one of the normal guys. And so I go up there and I'm like, hey, I need to fly from this particular place to that particular place. I jump on mil air. Guy's like, okay, fine. What's your name? And I give him my name, whatever my name was at the time. Okay, cool. What's your social? And I was like, because nobody ever asked your social, and you should know it. I mean, this is where the movies, I know everything exquisitely. Yeah. No, grow up, Peter Pan. I've been living in this name for 2 years. I don't remember that detail because no one cares. So I remember I'm like, 976472559. And the guy looks at me, Sergeant whatever, looks at me and says, sir, you're missing a digit. And I said,
2?
5. He goes, okay. And he looked at me like, I know you're full of shit. And I looked at him like, I'm full of shit, but obviously I'm a good dude. And yeah, sure enough, I went past. But it's just another one of those funny things. Like in a movie, no, that would have never flown, right? Unless it's like a comedy. But no, in real life, that shit happens. That stuff happens all the time. I mean, not like that, but
Yeah. Listen, I know that stuff happens because, like, do you remember when it used to be you would use your credit card and they'd run it and then maybe they'd say, hey, call, so it wouldn't be like swipe, denied, or accepted. Sometimes they'd say they'd have a code and they'd have to call the actual bank that it was issued on.
Yeah.
So I've been at a cash register, bought whatever, $1,000, $2,000 worth of shit, and it's all piled up, and they run my American Express or something. Yeah. And they call American Express and they're like, I don't know, do you, I need your, what was it, like date of birth.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there like, fuck. And I'm like, you know what? I said, that's an excellent question. And I pulled my wallet out, opened my driver's license, and I said, who am I today? My name is Mark so-and-so, and my, and I give him my date of birth. The truth, I don't remember the date of birth. Like, I'm like, and all the girl did was, she giggled cutely and told him the name or gave him the date of birth, and they said, okay, and they hung up the phone and went through. But my buddy was sitting next to me, and I'm telling you, he was shitting a brick.
I bet.
Oh, my God, bro. I was going to start running. I was going to.
No, be cool, man.
Yeah.
Tell a little laugh, a little gleam in your eye. You've already called her dear a couple of times, and you're good. Now, to this day, it's funny when I'm going out of the country, I'll still look at my passport before I get to immigration just to make sure it's the right passport, and B, I've got my story right. Yeah. Just out of habit because,
I know. I mean,
that's a thing, right?
I was going to say that kind of stress has to affect you in some way, give you some kind of new something. I'm not saying it's, what is it? PTSD or anything, but it's something.
Well, and the other funny thing too is you're talking about your credit cards. You just learn all these great life skills. Like
it really helped me.
Yeah, well, like at the end of the day, cash is king. You get away with all kinds of stuff if you got enough cash in your pocket. And so we used to talk about people like, oh man, did you always carry a gun? Oh, did you always do this? You always do that? I'm like, really? Hardly ever. But you know what I always carried? Cash. You know what gets you out of a lot of jams? Cash. Yeah. Very few things that the right amount of cash won't fix, no matter where you are. That's just, it's just life.
It's funny. We were shooting a sizzle reel the other day, and the guy right outside. This was actually funny because literally, the guy that we're interviewing, he says, and this was my buddy Danny. We're putting together a sizzle reel for one of the books I wrote, and to try and get a doc made, right? So we go, and the guy's like, listen, we might need to hurry it up because I don't know if you noticed, it was in a huge condo, right? He goes, I don't know if you noticed, but they're doing construction outside, like, I mean, literally right outside his door. He's like, they're chipping up all the old tile and replacing it. And we're like, right. Takes 30 minutes to get the mic on, playing with the cameras, doing everything perfect. And literally, he sat there, and Danny asked him a question. He goes, well, and I was like, if this wasn't irritating, like, that would have been pretty funny. Like, I was like, honestly, like, you couldn't have timed that. And so Danny has to go out and bribe the guy. Like, he goes out, he's like, hey man, we're doing this. The guy's like, yeah man, they know I have to do this. Right. And Danny's like, I got he only had 90. He goes, I got $90 in cash right now. Yep. And the guy was like, you give me another 100 and I'll shut this whole fucking place down. Yeah. And he goes, I will go get you the other 100. Yeah. As soon as we're done, I'll get you the other 100. Yeah. He said, no problem.
Now, that doesn't sound like a bribe. That sounds like a little bit of financial incentivization to get a desired outcome.
Yeah. It's true, though. It's true. It's the same thing. Cash. He's not going to take a Cashapp.
No. So I was, a couple of weeks ago, I'm in a place doing a thing with some guys. And we needed to do a thing in a place. And there's like a homeless guy standing there he's got all his bags and he's asking for money, and we're sitting there like, son of a bitch, we need to do exactly what we need to do right there. Right. And so everyone's like, what do we do? I'm like, all right, hold on. So I just grab a 20, walk over to the guy. I'm like, hey man, I got a thing right here. I was like, I'm going to give you $20, but I need you to fuck off and go around the corner. Okay. And he's like, but you're going to give me $20? I said, yeah. He goes, okay, guess I'm going. I said, awesome. And he walks away, and it was just funny because, it was one of those times where like people are like, wow, you just went up and talked to him? And I'm like, yeah, I gave him $20, told him to fuck off, and he did.
He's happy to talk to him.
Yeah, and he's done. And but I don't know. I guess not everybody's equipped like that. I guess I don't know. I don't even think about stuff like that.
Right. To me, I think what happens is most people are more. I'm not sure how to say this. They're more sensitive. They're more concerned. Like, what if he said this? What if he looked me in the face and told me to fuck off? Like, I'm okay with that. It's not. I'm not going to cry myself.
We're not going to be any further behind than where we are right now.
Exactly. But honestly, let's face it. Most people just don't. They don't. They don't think like that at all.
No. That's probably my soon-to-be ex-wife said that was one of my superpowers. Yeah. I'll ask anybody to do anything at any time, and it's one of those things. You ask enough people to do enough things, people are just going to say yes. Yeah. And some people just will not ask the question, and whether it's talking to somebody at a bar, whether it's asking for, hey, can I get 5% off of that? I did a real estate course one time, and it was awesome. And the guy basically said, okay, to be a successful real estate investor, you're going to have to ask people for discounts. You're going to have to ask people for money back and all this stuff. He said, so here's what we're going to do in this class. You got to go to Starbucks and ask for a discount on your coffee. Right. And people are like, what? No, the price is the price. He goes, the price isn't the price. Everybody's got some flexibility. You got to go ask. And some people just couldn't do it, wouldn't do it. And me, walk in and get a free cup of coffee because you'll ask. You'll be funny. You'll do whatever you need to do. And
you have to be willing to be embarrassed.
Well, that's it.
And if you can get it, once you get over that, the world opens up.
Now, I think my wife would say you have to have no shame.
Same thing. Well, how many times have I said that? I say that all the time. I say, people are like, well, I don't, especially with the whole con man thing. They're like, I don't want to offend you. I'm like, listen, bro. For 13 years, every 2 weeks, I had a guy, when I would go to visitation to visit like my mom, I would have a guy that would say, strip down, spread your ass cheeks, bend over and cough. I'm like, do you think you can embarrass me? Right. Like, I'm done with that. Right. But we have our booking agent is named Tyler, and Colby and I, right? Like, his superpower is he will walk up to anybody, anywhere. Like, what was the one where, what was the story where he's like, you guys were somewhere and somebody said, oh, that's so-and-so. And he said, oh, you want to meet him? And I said, here, come on. Like, and he was so confident about it. They thought, this is you, right? That didn't you guys think, oh, he must know him. Right. And so walked up and said, excuse me, John, you got to meet so-and-so and such. And the guy was like, oh, okay, yeah. Start talking to him. And 2 or 3 minutes into the conversation, they all realized, You don't know this guy.
Right.
You just walked up, interrupted him in front of talking to 2 other people to introduce us.
Yep.
But that's his. Am I right? Do I have that wrong? Or
that's how he does. I mean, he's the reason why I'm here, really.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking to him on the phone. He's like, what do you need to get this podcast going? Because when I started for 6 months, I'm just talking to the screen, to the camera. Hey, this is what I do. Blah, blah. And he's like, how do you? I'm like, look, it's not working. I'm running out of stuff. I need to be able to interview people, but I need this and this and this. And he's like, well, I'll find somebody for you. I'm like, okay, you'll find somebody. 3 days later, I got a guy. He's gonna meet you. He lives in Lakeland. His name is Colby. How does this happen? Like, but those are the people that get things done.
Yeah.
The guys that not afraid to be embarrassed or ask for things and be told no.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But
I
I don't know. Do you learn how to do that, or is it just a gene you're born with?
To me, I learned it because I think for me, it's funny too, because this is a guy, Jess has heard this because I just had dinner with this guy. His name is David Simpson.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was 17 and he was, I think he's like he was probably 15 or 16. And we used to drive around. You're in your 40s, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I self-identify as a 28-year-old, but
so
yeah.
So we're driving around. Used to be, there was no social, Friday. I'm
familiar.
Yeah. Friday nights, you'd go to someplace like, the mall or Burger King, and guys would just drive around in their cars, right? Yeah. Or they would have a space where you
cruise the strip.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And David we'd be driving. He'd go, stop the car. And he'd jump out. He's 15 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 17 and can barely talk to a girl.
Mm-hmm.
He's 15, would jump out, walk over to 5 or 6 girls, walk over and go, hi, my name's David Simpson. And the girls would be like, hi. He'd say, hi, I don't know if you have a boyfriend or not. I saw you and, you're beautiful and I would love to get your phone number. And listen, 9 out of 10 girls were like, write the phone number down, give it to him, thanks. Yeah. And he'd get up and get in the car. He'd say, keep driving. And I would be like, was you embarrassed?
What happened?
What if she said, do you know her? No. What if she said no? He'd be like, never fucking seen this chick before in my life. I'm never going to see her again unless I call her. What if she laughs? He goes, like, I've never been laughed at. Like, and he's 15 with that confidence. Yeah. And I realized he's like, what's the worst that happens? I get embarrassed. So what? And I thought, that's how you're going to have to be able to meet girls. Because if you don't do that, you're never going to be able to meet any chicks. Yep. I'm 17 years old. I think I'd had like 1 or 2 girlfriends my whole life. Yeah. And those were sympathy girlfriends. They just felt bad for me.
Well, I think that question you're asking yourself right there is probably one of the most empowering questions possible. What's the worst thing that could happen if? And now, even if you add on the second one that says, what's the likelihood of that?
Right.
I coach people, and if I ask them those 2 questions,
it starts getting very, very
100%. 100%. Right? Is she going to pull out a gun and shoot you in the face? No. Is she going to laugh at you? Okay. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? And how likely is that? Probably not. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I love that.
What is it? I forget the saying how it is, but basically most people, they basically ruin themselves in their mind. The anticipation of what's going to go wrong is worse in their mind than it typically is in person.
Yep.
Typically, with the exception of, I'm sure, some things. I had another joke, but it was just perfect for this. This is a joke my dad told me, which lets you know the person my father was. He said there were 2 guys standing at a bus stop, and this chick walks by, and one guy goes, he goes, hey baby, you want to go back to my place and have sex? She slaps him right in the face. The other guy kind of chuckles. Another girl walks by, he goes, baby, you want to go back to my place and have sex? Boom, she slapped him right in the face. Another one walks by, hey, you want to go back to my place? Psh, she slaps him right in the face. Guy starts laughing. The one guy looks at the other guy, he goes, man, you must get slapped a lot. He goes, yeah, but I fuck a lot of women. So, yeah, it's a numbers game.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
So I have another question.
Okay.
So did you do your entire career in the Middle East? I mean, you learned to speak Chinese. You would think, at some point, were you able to?
Well, I did the majority of my career in the Middle East, several Middle Eastern assignments, but I also worked in Europe. I worked in Asia.
Okay, so you did at some point, you got to Asia.
Yeah. I did. I mean, I spent a lot of time traveling to Asia. I wasn't assigned to Asia.
Okay.
But yeah, and plus, even if you're working in the Middle East, there are some targets that are worldwide. So, having the familiarity that I did with that particular culture and that particular country didn't hurt me at all.
Right.
Yeah.
So at what point did you, is there some pinnacle that you want to, during your career you want to talk about, or like how did you eventually leave the CIA? Or?
Yeah. It's interesting. I thought I would never leave. Right. I thought, my goal, I wanted to be what was called the DDO, the Deputy Director for Operations. I was promoted fast. I had big jobs. Everything was going well. And at a certain point, I wasn't going to be able to go overseas anymore. I had a son. He had some health issues. And so overseas assignments weren't necessarily in my future. And so I was back serving at headquarters in Washington. And I realized, there's sort of the field cats and house cats, and I wasn't much of a house cat. I just wasn't a headquarters guy. And I think the other thing was I got to the point where I just had a lot of other interests. Wanted to do some other things, and I said, you know what? At a certain point, one time around life, you get one time around the rock and all that good stuff, and I just decided that it was time to do something else. And so I did. I had accomplished almost everything I wanted to accomplish in the agency, and I had been an Elon fanboy.
Right.
I thought he was amazing, and I thought what he was doing was incredible. And people kind of knew that. I mean, I had pictures of Elon hanging up in the offices that I ran overseas.
Okay.
And so through a lot of...
Listen, you're not alone, by the way.
Right.
Because my wife will tell you that I'd say 50% of my searches and the things I listen to in the shower, getting ready, are all about going to Mars, and it's all about Elon Musk and
a really good friend of mine right now. We were talking about like what's one of your lifetime goals or what's on your bucket list, and I said going into outer space.
Right.
And she said, "Oh, good Lord," hers is, well, I want to be able to retire or whatever, and. No, I'm saying I wanted to be an astronaut when I was a kid. What the heck's the matter with that?
So did I, but I'm nowhere near smart enough.
No, same. My highest level of math was actually called math.
Right.
It was math 3 for life skills. I use it all the time. But yeah, no, I wasn't a big math guy or anything really. But So I had an opportunity to interview with Tesla, and it was going well. And then I just started doing ridiculous things. When you're in a catbird position, I was in a great job with the agency. I had been selected for another great job. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to make some ridiculous requests. I want to work from home. I want a lot of money. I want a lot of equity. I want all this stuff. And at the end of the day, it all came back and it was like, yeah, okay. So I told my wife, I'm like, I think I got to go.
Yeah.
And that's what I did, and I haven't looked back. I mean, there's aspects I miss, like we talked about earlier. When you're on the outside and you're not on the inside, there's not that commonality. You can't explain, remember that time when,
right,
or going through these certain things. People on the outside just don't understand, and that's okay because you still keep a lot of friends from the inside. But I miss that. I miss the people. I miss some of the work, but for the most part, I've been really happy moving on, and have got to scratch that itch. I'll never have to go through life going, well, what if?
Right.
What if I just was too afraid to make a jump? I was too afraid to take that step. I don't have to do that.
Yeah. I was going to say, well, you obviously you've heard, nobody sits at the, you know what I'm saying? People at the end of their life, it's always the things that they didn't do that they regret.
Right.
It's not the things they did and failed. I'll fail. I got no problem with failing.
No, listen, there's a lot of things I'll probably regret at the end of my life. Whenever that may come. But one of the things is not taking a chance.
Right.
I've taken every chance there is out there, and I don't regret it. I mean, every stage of my life, you take a chance. Just do it. And more often than not, it works out well. And if it doesn't, right, you either win or you learn. Sometimes you fail and you walk back and you go, well, that was dumb as hell. I should have done something different. Right. But I never have to ask, well, what if?
Seemed like a good choice at the time.
Oh, man, I'm telling you, there was like one time in my life, you'll probably cut this out, but it's kind of funny. I was in high school and I went to a dance. I went to a dance with this girl, and she was gorgeous. She was gorgeous. And all I'm thinking in my head is, oh, man, maybe we could end up dating or something like that. And we're driving back to her place. And she's telling me a story about how, we're on this backcountry road, and that's the place over there where everybody always parks. And I'm like, oh, I'm just enamored over. And I finally, we get back to her place and, whatever. And I'm driving home, and I'm like,
was she telling me?
What in the heck? What was I thinking? Holy smokes! I missed the opportunity. She was giving me the sign, and it's funny because I don't know, that was a few years ago, and I still remember that because there's so few times when I'm like, I should have done this or I should have done that. Nah, I'll probably do it, and I may regret it, but I'll not regret not doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I got a bunch of those times. So what did you do for Tesla?
At Tesla, I worked on their insider threat program. I set up their insider threat program, and I managed global information security investigations, which is a really fancy...
I was going to say, stop it.
Which is a really fancy way to say I designed the programs to prevent people from stealing our intellectual property and confidential information. And then I ran the investigative teams that when we had indications that people were stealing, we would investigate it. And yeah, that's what I did. Yeah, hand to hand. I always joke hand to hand combat with people trying to steal information because left, right, up and down, people trying to take information.
Right.
And that's just life these days.
What was that, Jess? What is the light bulb thing? With the light bulb for an application for a job? You're filling out your resume. Yeah. All right, change the light bulb. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, read it. Can you find it? Boy, she's a horrible, Joe Rogan's got Jamie.
Right, and
he's on it before Joe Rogan said, hey, Jamie. He's like, I got it.
I already got it. It's already in his ear, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. That's,
but I mean, it's the South. I'm in the South, and, I'm not Joe Rogan.
I love the South.
Yeah, I love the South.
Nothing wrong with the South now. That's, crying out loud.
I love Florida. I love our governor. And listen, let me tell you something. Every time I say something like that, boy, the comments, man, people just hate.
Oh man, I don't even politics are politics, man. It's all hard pass.
Did you find it? Okay, listen to this. This is for a resume. Yeah. I'm not gonna read it.
Remind me, by the way, while she's reading that, if you want to talk about fancy ways to say anything. Remind me to tell you about the time when I actually performed a wedding ceremony for a temporary marriage for a guy and then bought him a hooker so he would pay so we could get information from him. The way I explained that in official correspondence. But anyway, go ahead.
You're starting to read like me.
I know, right?
This is change a light bulb. Like, that's beautiful,
That's
right?
perfect.
It sounds amazing.
I hope that person's applying for an EA job or a marketing job or any job, really. Yeah.
That's how it sounded when you just explained. That's what it sounded like when you just explained your thing.
Well, and it takes a little while to get that to roll off the tongue in a way that's sophisticated and savvy.
So the
I didn't pay for a prostitute.
Listen.
No, that sounds horrible. That doesn't sound like something I would do.
Every good story starts off that way.
It doesn't sound like something I would do. Now, I did facilitate an extramarital affair with a professional one time. And
this is not something the CIA would do.
Right. Yeah, let's just say hypothetically, right? Yeah, hypothetically. Facilitated an extramarital affair with a professional. And to do so, right, in accordance with his religious traditions, I had to perform the official marriage ceremony so that he was right with his
God.
With his God.
Yeah.
Yeah. People are like, wait, did you marry him to a hooker? I was like, whoa.
Just for
what are you talking about?
Just for
what are you talking
minutes.
about? That
Yeah.
The other one I think was my favorite one was sometimes you got to account for money.
Yeah.
Right. Some of my best espionage scenes, in movies and things are like receipts. I need receipts. That's absolutely true. That is 1,000% true. And so sometimes you're not in a place where you're in a facility where they don't generally, it's not customary to provide receipts. And so that was my other favorite one when I had to do non-standard accounting. I had to explain. Individual entertainers did not provide individualized detailed receipts for entertainment services rendered.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it made a lot more sense than saying, you don't get receipts for lap dances.
Yeah.
But, it's for America, for crying out loud, Matt.
No,
I mean,
I
somebody's got to.
I understand.
It's horrible.
You don't have to explain to me. I'm with you.
Listen. It's not Mother Teresa we're working with, for crying out loud.
Yeah, I don't want to be here. It's a business meeting. The
I
client chose this
I just
place.
want to be home.
Yeah.
I'd rather meet in a library, maybe a church. I don't know. Right?
Good times.
Yeah.
So I do have a question.
Yeah.
I do have a question.
Lay it on me.
And this is a Julian Dory question, by the way. Like, this is the kind of thing that he asks.
All right.
Because you're here.
Okay.
So it's kind of on topic. Well, this is more military, but I think it's still relevant. I think you're still the guy to ask, probably. Does China? This is off topic. I know this, so you can make a TikTok of this, though. Okay, does China invade Taiwan? I watch stuff on this all the time, so I'm just curious, in your opinion, or do you not even pay attention to that?
No, I pay attention.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I pay attention. I don't know. I don't know. Here's the calculus, right? Can we be distracted enough in Europe that they evade Taiwan and don't think that we're going to respond? Can they foster enough dissent within this country that we're so busy fighting each other
Right.
that we can't marshal our resources to respond to Taiwan? Are they full of so much hubris that they think that they can conduct a successful amphibious invasion of Taiwan and successfully take it over? That's not a foregone conclusion. I mean, anyone needs to read our history of World War II. That's not a layup.
Right.
Do they think we have the political will to respond? Now, I'm not a political guy, but I'll tell you, if they look at our White House and say they're too weak,
Right.
they're not going to respond, we're going to do it. Or Russia has signed up that they will come to China's collective defense, and they've signaled that to us, and we don't have the perceived or real strength to deter it. I think it's hard for me to imagine that they would, but I can't overstate the presidency of President Xi and his worldview and how bringing Taiwan back under heel
Right.
is in their strategic interest. I mean, look at Hong Kong, right? We signed the agreement. The Brits signed the agreement in '99. Hong Kong, that Hong Kong's going to maintain Hong Kong and everything's going to be honky dory, right up until the Chinese roll in. And now Hong Kong is part of China. If you don't think China's, Hong Kong, China, China, Hong Kong, you haven't read the news, you haven't read the press, you don't understand what's going on there.
Well, you turn up the heat slowly. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Initially, it's all, no, it's good, it's good. And
No,
then
it's
we're
cool,
gonna
it's
make
cool,
this
it's
one
cool, it's cool.
One change here
Yeah,
and there and there, and then before you know it, it's China.
And now it's China.
Right.
I don't know. I sure hope not.
Well, also, I mean, their economy is just in free fall right now. As much as they're making every single attempt to inflate or keep it to appear that it's stable, it's not. So I mean, but then I don't know. Like in the United States, you start a war, it's kind of rally around the chief. I don't know if it's the same thing there.
I think so.
You think?
I think so. And I think, I heard this described one time in a different scenario, but I think it's the same. Taiwan for China is a fish bone stuck in their throat, right? If they try to swallow it down, it's going to cause damage. If they try to spit it up, it's going to cause damage. So it's just kind of stuck there, right? They can't say that that Taiwan is no longer part of China, but if they try to by force reincorporate it, either one is going to cause significant damage to China. So it's that fish bone that's just stuck in their throat right now, and I don't know. I mean, there's been some pretty significant things that have happened recently in global, international security, but I don't know. I think the best thing that the West can do is to show strength to China and say that there's so many things that you can do for prosperity of China that don't include forcibly trying to reunify Taiwan. But that's a tough one. I don't know if they do or not.
I know. I mean, I've watched tons of videos on it, from historians to military experts and it's the same thing. It's like I don't know. I mean, But the whole problem is too, is like if they get they could take it, but if the Taiwanese can hold them off for about because it takes about 2 to 3 days for the U.S. to get there, so they have to hold them off for 3 days. That's a hell of a fight.
Well, and what are we willing to do? Are we willing to spill blood in Asia over Taiwan? Now, there's a lot of times I would have said absolutely, right, because it's our security commitments. But some of the things that we're doing in the Middle East right now, I don't know.
Right.
We have American hostages.
I always assume yes, but I guess.
Look, we have American hostages right now, and we're not willing to go to war against countries that we could easily roll over.
Right.
If we decided to, but that's just not what we're doing right now. Okay. China, nuclear weapons, so there's a deterrent. Economic pain. I mean, it would be a huge decision. And our policy of strategic ambiguity works as long as they think that we've got a big enough stick and we're willing to swing it.
Right.
Now, I think it's to our favor that Russia is struggling so much in Ukraine. I think if Russia had taken Ukraine in a couple of days and no one had done anything, I think China would feel differently. But watching how the international community has rallied around together and is supporting Ukraine against Russia and how the cost to Russia right now. But yeah, that's a hard one. I don't know. Yeah, I like to gamble a little bit, and I don't know if I'd put money on that. I'd probably hedge.
Okay.
As I'm doing here.
Well, I don't think there's any clear, unless you had some extreme, insider knowledge that, and I don't think I don't know that anybody does.
There used to be a great thing we'd say in intelligence work. There's mysteries and there's secrets, right? Secrets you can steal.
Right.
Mysteries are things that, they haven't even decided themselves. So if there's an op plan to take Taiwan and it's in a file somewhere and they're on a timeline, that's a secret. But I really think this is a mystery. Yeah. I don't think anybody's decided. You could have the person who's got the most exquisite access that would tell you this is exactly what they're thinking today, but that doesn't mean that's what's happening or not. I really think this is a mystery. And I don't know. I don't know what the events would happen that would result in the physical attempt to take Taiwan.
Okay. I definitely agree. I understand that. So I have another question.
Yes, sir.
And these are so not true crime. Not that this has been true crime, but still, I'm just saying.
As we joked earlier, I would say I'm a patriot, but some people overseas would consider, the acts that I did overseas as criminal. Violating their laws or whatnot. Details.
So I have another question, which is, and it's really, well, I mean, I think it's probably just, because of the state of the union in general. And, just political unrest and the whole thing. And the fact that my wife and I went and saw this movie.
See Civil War?
Yeah. Did you see it?
I saw that the other night.
What'd you think? First of all, here, let me just preface this by saying this. There's multiple things that bothered me. One, I like a big budget, and obviously they didn't have the budget. The very end, when they go into Washington, that was great, but they didn't have a big budget. So the way they got around that was, hey, let's have these guys be just outside of the battle zone or the battles, and we'll have them go through I thought for what they had to work with, I thought they did a
smart
good job.
way to yeah.
But what bothers me is you never know what the rift is that causes. Let's causes, Texas and California. That's just stupid. And so I think obviously they were attempting to say let's not be specific, right? Obviously, and that definitely muddied the waters. But two, I would have preferred for it not to have been muddied, for it to be clear on what was the catalyst that caused this to happen, how did it happen, and then of course the movie in itself or the story in itself as it happens. But they were so vague that bothered me. But other than that, if you remove that, I thought it was pretty good.
So I thought it was the brilliance was in the avoidance. Right, they made a movie, and there were maybe one or two little things, and I'd be curious if you'd noticed anything that led me to think that it was one party or the other. But you're absolutely right. They made that as apolitical as it could have been. They even introduced that element of the Free Western Forces or whatever it was with California and Texas. Well,
that doesn't make sense.
Okay, fine. I'll buy Texas, but California, come on. What are they going to attack with? Glitter? Get out of here.
Right.
So there were pieces and parts there that were necessarily conflating it, and I don't know. I thought, but the taboo for me that they broke, and I thought what was so really interesting about it was that assault on Washington. And I think what's really fascinating, I love it when people say, oh, Second Amendment, who cares? You think your guns will stand up against tanks and planes? And my answer is usually, you think that the people with the guns and tanks, you think that the people with the tanks and planes are going to be on your side. And I'm not saying they are, or I'm not saying they aren't. I'm just saying that's a closer call than what you would imagine.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not suggesting or encouraging sedition or anything like that, or saying there's any seditious elements within our military. I'm just saying that the military necessarily is a reflection of our society. And to the extent that it's a 50-50 toss-up right now, or it's close, you have to imagine that that extends to all elements of the government, including the military. No, I thought it was a brilliant. Okay, so what did you think? I saw a couple little things in there. What did you think?
Well, one, it's funny because, my wife and I have talked about it, and I'm like, first of all, one of the things is I said, you have to wonder if you're in the National Guard and you're being told to invade this other state or fight your fellow soldiers, because obviously I'm assuming that like the National Guards, one thing, I think that the National Guards within those states were fighting on behalf of the state. So it's not like the U.S. government said, hey, we're taking all the National Guards and we're incorporating them, we're going to pull them all back, and you guys are going to fight us with pistols. Like, that's not what was happening, in my opinion.
Right.
The National Guards within those states were under the command of the governors in those states, and they were fighting and taking, of course, more troops as you go. But one of my issues is if you're in the National Guard in North Carolina and you're being told to fight against South Carolina, like, I'm not so sure that these guys are going to be. It might be like, hey, you know what? Like, I'm not going to do that. Like, these are American soldiers. Like, you're telling me to go in and kill, and these are American citizens. Like, even if I disagree with what they're doing, I'm not positive that you're about 50-50 on whether or not I'm going to fire on American citizens. And that's happened, right? Like, in some cases, like, not that Tiananmen Square, they didn't ultimately fight, but let's face it, when that college student walked out and stood in front of the tank, like, they were like, fuck, what do we do? Ultimately, of course, they fire on the crowd. But in a lot of these, revolutions, or even when the Soviet Union broke apart, right? Mm-hmm. Like, these soldiers aren't willing to fire on, and they're coming in strong, but a lot of them aren't willing to fight to fire on their own Russian citizens or Ukrainians or whatever at that time, just because of the unrest. But here's one of the things I noticed. One, I noticed the guy's the president. It's his third term. Mm-hmm. So that to me felt like they're because that's one of the big buzzwords is Trump's going to try and become president for life. Okay, whatever. And two is, so that was one thing. And two, when they said that the photojournalists, when they get to Washington, like, they're killing photojournalists, they're killing them, or not just journalists in general, in Washington D.C. Like, oh, you'll be executed immediately. So I felt like they were leaning a little bit. It made me feel like they were saying a Trump-like individual becomes president, goes for a third term. Maybe that starts the war. He's executing journalists. So it leaned a little bit that way, but it also leaned a little bit the other way too. Like, you were just unsure. And I did like the fact that towards the end, when they were going into Washington, that they get the call where the U.S. says, we're falling back. We're not going to fight for it. You go ahead and take it. Like, it's like, we realize we've lost, and they throw in the towel, because I think that's true. Like, hey, if once we know it's over, it's like, look, we need to know now we're going to be reincorporated into this. Yeah. So I need to be looking out for myself now, because we've already lost. And do we really want to fight over Washington? These, there's monuments, there's history, and it's a done deal. The battle's lost. Yeah. So you have a few pockets that were holding out, which I like too, that the Secret Service was holding out. I'm like, how many guys are there?
Right. Like, I did like that. I mean, look, and that's the Secret Service. Yeah. And call me an old school guy, right? If you work for the government, you're apolitical. You serve the party that's in power. And so the fact that the Secret Service was defending, again, spoiler alerts in here a little bit, but the fact that the Secret Service was defending the president all the way, I actually like, because that's their mandate, whether they like him or not. That's what they're supposed to do.
I agree. Yeah. But and I like that, and I like and I do love the fact that and of course I've written a book about So I've done some research. So, but it's just so funny because in a lot of African countries in general that, people think, oh, well, they're military. Well, look, most of their military generals, like, it's like their army.
Mm-hmm.
They're supposed to be at the behest of the president of that country, but that doesn't always mean that's not always the case. But at least in the United States, I feel fairly certain that, that the generals that are underneath the president are going to listen to him. Like, hey, you're fired. You know what I'm saying? Like in some of these African countries, it's like, no, I'm not leaving. Like that's a bad call on your part.
Well, and I think that the rule of law in the U.S. and our tradition of civil control over the military is one of the things that is one of our greatest strengths. And it's one of the reasons why, again, as apolitical as I am, I didn't love at the end of the last administration when the chairman of the Joint Chiefs said, I was going to take nuclear weapons authority away from President Trump.
Right.
I'm sorry, who the hell are you?
Yeah.
Who elected you? I'm sorry, who's the bigger threat to democracy now? The president that you disagree with, or you as a military leader saying that you are going to take the power away from the duly elected president of the United States?
Right.
That scared there was, I don't know, man. It's been a weird couple of years.
Yeah, it has.
And, at a certain point, my wife used to say, man, we're really close to a civil, or this is as bad as it's ever been. I'm like, honey, literally we fought a civil war.
Yeah.
So let's
assume that's the worst.
Let's take a breath. But in the last handful of years, I'm kind of coming around to it where you can see pathways where this doesn't end well. And I thought that was the most interesting thing about the movie Civil War was it broke that taboo of that could never happen here.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like all the times that the media would show us different images that it wanted to force down our throats that certain things could happen. Right. Before that they had actually happened, but just to inculcate us that, look, this type of person could be in this kind of role, or this type of person could be in that kind of role. It hasn't happened yet, but let's get everyone comfortable with it. Well, for me, watching this, that's the way I felt. It was like, well, now we've got a frame of reference.
Mm-hmm.
Now we can envision what this would look like, whether you would agree or not, whether the president was left or right or whatever. But now, and even how it unfolds, in my mind, it was something started from one of these states, and as they're rolling across, they're recruiting active duty military elements that are fighting, and as they're going, calling their buddies, hey, we're coming.
Right.
Are you on our side or their side? We'll fight you if we need to, but in a lot of ways, I think if the cause was just and righteous, okay, we all swore an oath to defend this country from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And there's been times in the recent history where I have felt very conflicted about that, saying, is this that time?
Right.
Do we have domestic enemies that are undercutting the United States from inside? And at what point, if you've sworn an oath and that's your credo, is it time to stand up and say, this isn't right? This is that time that we swore that oath about. And I never thought in a million years that you would be questioning that. But I have really, I can even remember at times I went back and pulled out my oath of office or my oath of service and read it back word for word. And it's powerful. And having to say, now what's that mean? Who tells you when it's time that you have to confront domestic enemies? Yeah, there's some big boy stuff going on right now. And I always say I miss being young when I used to know everything. And as the older I get, the less I know and the less certain I am of things. And it's really hard right now to have your eyes open and your ears open and not to be concerned.
Yeah.
And to associate a lot of the things that's happening in this country with things that we've seen overseas for years. Yeah, it's a banana republic. This would never happen in the U.S. That would never happen in the U.S. And all of a sudden, it's like tick, 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 tick. That's all happening here.
Yeah. Oh, it's insane. That to me is insanity. Like the appearance. Here's the thing. It's funny. Jess and I were talking about this, and it was like I was like, what's amazing to me now is that they're not even concerned. Like.
About the appearance or propriety of anything.
Exactly. Like you're not even concerned about how it looks at this point. Like, do you have do you feel so overwhelmingly confident and know that you have such a stranglehold that you can blatantly, step aside the Constitution. You can make false accusations. You can do all kinds of things. You can, $350 million fine. Like, what are you doing? Are you insane? Like, it's just out of, you're trying to break someone here when you should have been a few $1 million fine at best.
Yeah, and I would say on every side, I'm just waiting for, we're the country of Kennedy. We're the country of Reagan. Who is going to stand up and speak clearly and thoughtfully? And, and again, like everybody else says, this is what we've got.
Yeah.
Right now, this is it, 360 million, and this is the best we've got.
Yeah.
Come on, man. I don't buy it. But the policies, the process has become so toxic and so poisonous that no one who would want to run on either side in this environment. You look back at a guy like Colin Powell. Why in the world didn't he want to run? Do I think he had skeletons in his closet? No. Do I think that maybe he didn't want to subject himself to having his reputation be besmirched like that? Probably. I don't know. But golly, Ned, it's just too great of a country. It's too great of a thing we have going on for someone to not be willing to stand up and say what's right. And the vast majority of people say, I'm not on this extreme or I'm not on that extreme. I'm down the middle.
Right.
And why don't we have someone who can come right down the middle and say, vote for rationality, vote for reason, vote for compromise, vote for intelligence, articulation, energy, youth, all these. This is America, for crying out loud.
Right.
I don't understand it.
Listen, I
don't mean you got worked up.
No.
Golly, Ned,
I was just thinking, you said right down the middle. I'm always saying, like, I feel like I'm fairly conservative, not extremist, but fairly conservative. But look, I'd like free healthcare. Like, there's some stuff like, I hear you.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be nice? But yeah, so.
And I think it's hard not to be, take a little bit of here, a little bit of there. It's just the extremes on either side of just.
Look, I want someone to feed the poor. I'm not going to do it, but you're right. Somebody does have to do that. I hear you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay. So you don't see a civil war coming, or maybe not. You're not sure.
I didn't say I didn't see one coming. I just said that
you're getting closer and closer.
I just said the taboos broke. Now we can envision what one looks like.
Oh, listen, every time a Black Hawk helicopter, McDill's not far from here, right? So every time a Black Hawk helicopter goes by, Jess takes a picture of it and sends it to me. I'm telling you, something's going on. I'm like, it's a Black Hawk helicopter. I see them all the time.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm waiting anxiously about this fall and the way the election goes and the way the transition of power goes in ways that I've never been on eggshells or never been concerned about that process. Up until recently, I was never concerned about our democratic process, right? We vote. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Take the good, you take the bad. There you go. It's facts of life, right? But now, I think on the jiggling with the rules and the concern about the authenticity of the election on either side, and then the willingness to give up the ability to look at it and go, nope, I know what's right. I know what these people voted for, but I know what's right, so we're going to do that. That is
insanity.
That is frightening.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know how you can't be a little. If you're not a little concerned, then I think your head's in the sand. And I'm not saying I'm stacking ammo or food or getting my tinfoil hat all squared away, but it's concerning. It's concerning.
Listen, I got a ton of top ramen soup, and we got a bunch of meals ready to eat.
MREs.
MREs.
Yep.
We got a bunch of MREs. We only have like 4 of them, but still, we bought some. I just did it as a joke, for Christmas. But she was thrilled. I got her a survival booklet.
Yeah.
Got her some knives, some special knives, and a way to start fires without, with no matches. She's thrilled. So she's so I got a concerned, wife. I'm like, my problem is, and I think everybody's heard me say this before, to Jess, when she watches The Walking Dead, like, she's one of the survivors. Like, I'm thinking I'm one of the Walking Dead. Like, I'm not going to make it. Like, when she sees like a post-apocalyptic thing, I'm thinking I want to be right under the bomb. And she's like, no, I want to survive. We're going to rebuild. It's going to suck. Like, I'd rather just, because I don't want to get poisoned, die slowly. Like, just put me right under that fucker.
I don't know. I mean, I hate to even think like this, but if all that happens, fine. I've got some land. I've got a thing. Just leave me alone.
Yeah.
I'll go right back to my libertarian roots of just leave me alone.
I'm not there yet.
Right. I'm good. I'll be cool. You be cool. Go do your thing. We'll just be cool here. And if you want to come live with me and be cool, we'll be cool together. It's fine. We don't have to, but a little don't tread on me, a little.
I need an acre. I need a bunch of solar panels. I need a water filtration. We need that. I'm working on. I'm going to work on that. I got to work on that.
Yeah. I mean, again, I don't get too over the bend, around the bend on that, but at the same time, yeah, most days I'd just rather be just left alone. Just let me do my thing.
Listen, the next year is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting year.
Well, we're already into it. Yeah.
What is closest call? Like, do you have a story about like your closest call with, I don't know, getting like someone finds out you're an agent or maybe?
Yep. All right. So first off, we are not agents.
Okay.
So CIA officers are officers. When the media gets this wrong, it drives me nuts. FBI, special agent. Secret Service, special agent. DEA, special agent. CIA officers are officers. The people that work for us are our agents. And so, not that I'm not hating on you. I'm just, it's a very fine line. And when anybody starts any kind of show or anything like that and talks about CIA agents, I'm like, these guys are. It's amateur hour. They don't even know what they don't even have the ticket to the right movie, right? So 1, 2. What's my closest call? That's a good one because there have been some close ones. I mean, there's a couple of different ways, right? I mean, I was in places where bombs went off that were close. I don't know if that counts. I can remember one time, everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, how many times did you fire your weapon?" I'm like, "I never fired my weapon," right? But I can sure sugar remember that time I was stuck in traffic. And I had a pistol in the small of my back, and somebody got out of a car sitting right in front of me and came right back at me. And I was out of my pistol and through the window at him, right through the front windshield at him. And the guy gets his keys out of his pocket and goes back and opens up the trunk. And, your heart's like, and again, it's one of those things. Well, that doesn't sound very sexy. What? Oh, you were in traffic and the guy looked like he was, and it looked like, in one of those circumstances where he just gets out and pumps you full of.
Right, yeah.
Full around. Anybody who's listening is like, I don't remember reading that in the cable. I think we're supposed to write cables for every time you draw your weapon. Yeah, whatever, dude. No, didn't get a chance to write that one up. But yeah. No, there were a lot of time. I mean, and then the rest of it, I work with people that got compromised and killed.
Right.
So close calls, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, there's some calls that weren't even close. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And if you're playing a big boy game, you're not throwing no hitters. Other side gets a vote, and sometimes people don't do what they should do. And you live with those people the rest of your life, at least in your mind.
I was going to say, do most of the time when you've talked to somebody and you've said, look, we need, if you ever came across this, because I understand that I mean, from what I understand, which is nothing. But you don't ever get to the point where it's like, hey, listen, I'm with the CIA. It's more like, hey, if you ever just wondering, if it's all kind of a massage, right? Like a slow, if you ever were to come across this, I could get you some cash. And then at some point they realize who you are and what's happening, what you're asking. So.
No, that's absolutely wrong.
No? Okay, cool. What is it?
No, bro. So when we start, it's a massage, right?
Right.
I like the way you described that. It's a massage. No, when we start, it's like that. But when you're done, if you're doing your job, I've looked you in the eye, and
right
what you're doing and who you're doing it for and what you're doing it for, and we're having that conversation. And I'm even so far as, I mean, it's 100% clear.
Okay. Well, I mean, I kind of assumed that, but I didn't know. Like, I mean, I'm assuming at some point they're like...
And not all services work like that.
Right.
Some services always work with a fig leaf, or there's some times where you leave a little ambiguity to it. But no, if you're doing your job right...
At some point, they're like, they know what you want.
Look, the person is 100% cooperative with what you're trying to do and becomes a co-conspirator.
Right.
Now, it's hard. Some people can't quite get there. But if you're doing it right, that's what you're doing. There's zero disclarity about what's happening. Zero. And it has to be, because you have to be able to talk to them and say, here are the ramifications. This is why. If you don't do this right, you are going to swing from the bottom of a crane, and I'm not guessing.
Right.
And if you don't have the stones to do it, that's okay. I would rather you tell me, bro, that's not for me. I'm out. I can't do that.
Right.
Now, I'm not going to say this on the first meeting or on the fifth meeting or anything like that. I'm not going to scare the hell out of you. But at the same time, if I'm being professional and I can sleep well at night knowing that I've told people if you don't do X, this is going to happen. And they didn't do X and that happened and I sleep well at night.
Right.
Because I did my job. I gave them every chance to be successful. And if they weren't, I don't know what to tell you. But no, absolutely. That's part of our ethos, part of our professionalism. You know, we owe that to the people that we're working with. So they understand the dangers. They understand the ramifications. But a lot of the people we work with are working on the side of good, are working on the side of darkness, or I'm sorry, on the side of lightness against the darkness that is their home country, that is their government. They know that by working with us that they're going to favorably be able to change things in their country. And they're taking that risk. These are people that have enormous courage. Enormous courage. I can't say enough about it. Whenever I hear someone's like, oh, he's a snitch or he's a rat or how dare they do this, how dare they do that, oh, I'll fist fight. I'll fist fight because these people that I worked with, I mean, you can feel it from me. Mm-hmm. All my support, you know, because these are people that are in really tough situations. And I would hope that if we're ever in that situation ourselves, that we would have the courage and the strength to do what these people did. And so, I don't know how I got on this tangent, but golly, Ned, I mean, no, these people are, they're heroes and they're unsung. If you think we're not known, there's actually, it's really awesome. There's a new memorial at CIA headquarters for agents that have lost their lives working for us. These are foreign agents that are cooperating with us. And the monument's really small, and it's in a discrete area. And my favorite part about it is it's like a white on white monument. So you really have to look for it to see it. But if you know what it is, it's for all the people that have worked on behalf of our nation secretly and have lost their lives. And it's, yeah. No, and I don't, because I don't want to denigrate their memory, because these are people who knew exactly what they were doing. I'm going up against, I know my government's going to put me in an oven and burn me to death if I get caught, because they showed me my colleague. They showed me the video of my colleague they did that to. That's true story, Soviet Union back in the day, right? Or I know because I used to capture and torture people. And now for whatever reason, I'm not doing that anymore, right? These are people who know exactly what they're doing and take the risk anyway. And that's amazing. It's amazing.
Well, I was thinking about the
not to get all, you know.
No. I was thinking about like was it Aldrich Ames?
Yeah.
Like I was thinking about
yeah.
He just gutted.
The depths of hell for these traitors, Ames and Hansen and Snowden and some of the other ones. I mean, yeah, I don't know how you can do it. I don't know how you can swear an oath and work with these people and have met these people and know these people that are working on our behalf, and then turn around and sacrifice them. To protect your own ass.
Not even protective. Just Aldrich Ames was just doing it for money.
Well, I mean,
right? Just fucking
all
money.
of them's money. But when Ames gave the big dump to the Russians in Meeting 3, he knew that he was going to sell out the country. He knew he was doing it for his financial gain. But then he deliberately took the step to identify every single one of the people that he knew about in the Soviet Union who could have exposed him. Mm-hmm. And that was the big dump. And then they just went right down and decimated all of them. I can't imagine.
Yeah,
I can't imagine being a spy to begin with, being a traitor like that, for a country like that.
Right.
Again, I'm not talking about, you live in a country that's a horrible repressive regime. You live in Nazi Germany and you volunteer to the Americans or the British or the French or something during the war. No, I can understand that.
Right.
I just can't see going from goodness and going into the darkness just for money. I mean, that's, yeah. Darkest depths of hell for those people.
And he was Aldrich Ames was what? It was like 20 years or something. He worked for it was the FBI too, right?
No, that was Hansen. Hansen was with the FBI for 20 years. Ames. Yeah. Aldrich Ames was a CIA officer. He was when he volunteered to the Russians in 1985-ish. He was in a senior counterintelligence position within our Russian operations at headquarters. So he was in a position to basically disclose all of our Russian agents to the KGB, which he did. And then he went on spying until 1994.
and then Hansen worked for the FBI, but on the Russian desk. Right?
Hansen was basically the equivalent of Ames within the FBI. So he worked on Russian counterintelligence for a long time, and for 20 some odd years he spied for the Russians.
But he had information about the CIA, right? He had inside information, and that's why it was such a problem, because anything that would happen, they would think, oh, it's got to be an issue with the CIA, but it wasn't. It was because it just passed through his desk.
And that was the problem, that they both had such similar access.
Right.
That once we got Ames and identified Ames, we're like, okay, we're good. And then you start doing the math. You're like, wait, there were some FBI-only operations or other operations that Ames wouldn't have had access to. We've got another problem.
Right.
And no, it's complicated. It's complicated.
Let's talk about
good question though.
Like negotiation tactics. Like, is money pretty much the main thing that you?
Awesome. Great question. Is money the main motivator? Money is never a motivator.
Really?
Money is never a motivator. It's what you can acquire with money. And I always used to say, you're lazy if you say, oh, he's motivated by money. Bullshit. He's motivated by status.
Right.
He's motivated by, he's got a kid that needs to go to college. He's got a sick mom he needs to buy medicine for. He wants to keep up with the Joneses. Money is a vehicle to get to an end. Understand the end and you understand the motivation. If you just say money, well, that's not it, right? It's got to always be something else, right? And maybe it's just ego. Maybe it's just a game. Maybe it's just the thrill, and money's a way to keep score. But money's never, I don't know, for me, why people would do this, I always used to say it's a mosaic of motivations. It's never just one thing. It's usually a lot of different things that result in somebody making these kind of decisions. But yeah, money's an intellectually lazy one. It's that other thing. You know, it's what they can use money to do.
Okay.
Great question though, because people that money. God, every time I'm in a class, I tell people that if you think it's just money, look past it. What is it?
Right.
Because it's something else.
It's something he's acquiring with the money.
It's something else. Exactly. Something else.
But what's like the average duration, or maybe the longest, that you're like working on a single case or single person?
As long as you need.
It's a great question.
I know this guy, man. Where'd you find this guy? This guy.
I know.
Genius.
That's why he throws them out there sometimes.
Dude, this guy's genius. What's the longest I would work on a case? Well, I would say flippantly, and as long as I need. You know, I mean, if I can do it quickly, I'll do it quickly. If I can do it long, I'll do it long. Maybe it's years. Maybe it's a long period of time. Maybe it's been a series of people over multiple years and multiple people working on the same person. Or maybe it's multiple people working on one person in different ways to try to maneuver that person around to get them into the right spot.
What's the average?
No, I was just going to say, great question. I was just going to say, now all that said, usually, you know pretty quick.
Right.
If you've been around and you've done it, you kind of feel, you know, and a lot of mine, you just knew kind of, there's still steps you have to go through, and you can't go too quick or it makes people nervous, but you know pretty quick, you know, months, handful of months. Something for me, if it's dragging on years, probably it's not going to get done or get done in a way that you want it to get done.
Yeah, I know. I was just going to say, like, things that are going to get done typically happen very quickly.
Yep. Even if it takes a while to formalize it, intellectually or across the transom pretty early.
What are some of the signs that you can tell like someone's going to be able to help you or not help you?
Oh, great question. What's a sign that someone's going to be able to help me? Well, the first thing is they've got something that will help me. You could have 1 million people, all of whom are Go America and want to help as much as they can. Well, if you're not in a position to have anything of value,
right?
You know, so that's the first thing. You've got something of value. It can be all kinds of different things, but that's the biggest thing. Do you have something of value? Do you have something I want? And not me. Do you have something we want that would benefit us? That's the biggest thing.
But if they do, is there something specific?
Oh, well, I mean, you know, access to different types of information or to an area or to a thing or something like that.
No, I mean,
but what makes me
like you talk to him and you're like, oh, we know he has a girlfriend. We've listened to some phone calls. She needs money to go to school. He doesn't have it. That's the avenue. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what he's asking. Let me give you the textbook answer, and then I'll riff just a touch. I won't go too much, but just a touch, right? So the textbook answer is MICE, right? Money, ideology, compromise, or ego. That's what all the counterintelligence books say. Blah blah blah. Money, ideology, compromise, or ego. I'll tell you right up front. compromise isn't all that effective because, you know, you don't want someone to be there that doesn't want to be there. They're not going to be very good for you. Money, yes, but you heard me talk about that earlier. Money's a vector. Ideology's great, but if you're ideologically motivated but you're a coward, you're not going to come across. For me, ego more so than anything else. You've got to have the courage and you've got to be willing to act because people have the right access. People are in the right position, but it takes a special kind of person to actually step up and do it. Like we talked about before, not everyone's got that gene. Not everyone's got the willingness to do it. Don't have the ability. Even if they have the opportunity, they don't have the ability. So ego for me is people who have big egos. And humbly speaking, probably because I understand it well, I think probably. Some people would say, well, you know why you like ego so much? Because it's pretty easy for you to understand. Fine, whatever. But no, I like ego.
And what do? You just play to it? Just play into it? Like, you know, God, if you could get that. You can't, you don't have the ability to get this.
No, well, I mean, look, everyone's got different styles. And you know, for me, I'm just curious. I'd love to learn about things. And you know what? I tend to find people who are experts in areas love to tell you about what they're experts in areas of. And there's all kinds of other different techniques, but
right.
Yeah.
Now, other countries trying to flip Americans or American officers, agents, whatever, like, does that happen? Is there anything that, like, they look
I mean, yeah, we just... Yeah,
yes, it happens.
A couple of those examples.
Yeah, it absolutely happens. Look, it's a we would be naive to think that Americans are not going to commit unique. That we're uniquely inoculized against, espionage. Now, back in the day, right, back in the Cold War, maybe it's ideological. Maybe you've got some kind of issue with your mind, and you think communism's okay, or socialism's okay, or Hamas is okay. But so it happens. But I mean, yeah, it absolutely happens. Look, Americans have access. We're the greatest power in the history of the world right now. We could argue about where we are in that arc, but right now, and so everybody's interested in what we say, right? But yeah, no, it's same, right? Money, ideology, compromise, ego, same sort of things, and Americans are susceptible to it just like anybody else. And in a lot of ways, we're even more susceptible because of how free our society is and how trusting we are and how many people there are and how many targets there are, and yeah, we have a huge attack surface here. Ideally, we're doing a nice job of motivating people to stay on the straight and narrow, but in all walks of life, right? Sometimes people want to cut corners to get ahead, and if your currency secrets, maybe you think it's a good idea to try to sell them. Not, we'll catch you. We will catch you today, tomorrow, later.
Yeah.
What a horrible life that would be to live if you're an American like that. Because there's no argument that you are coming from the darkness to the light.
Right. You
are starting at the light and you're moving toward darkness. Whatever that darkness looks like. There is no righteousness in there. There's none. Right? If you're a North Korean or you're Russian or you're a Chinese or an Iranian or whoever, right? You're going from darkness to light. But if you're starting off in America, you're in the light, man.
Right.
You can't argue that it's anything other than the darkness in your soul that's taking you toward the shadow, in my humble opinion.
Oh, well, I was going to say there's a bunch of college students, I'm sure, out there right now that will tell you, vastly different, but then again, they don't really have a clue either, do they?
No. They don't understand. They've been told that lightness is dark and darkness is light. Nothing has meaning anymore anyway, and everything's relative, and it's just not. There's good and evil and light and dark.
Right. Yeah,
and they're confused.
I was going to say that the same country that gives you the ability to bitch and moan and protest, you're protesting against. Like, that doesn't make sense at all. Well, unless you have another one, I have a question. So I have a question, and there's probably no real answer, but here's what kills me is I'd interviewed someone a few months ago about this. Like I said earlier, he didn't know anything. He had almost no understanding of it at all. But so my understanding is, and I know it was something like, I don't know, was it 60 or 200 million? I forget the number, but the North Koreans actively have a department where they are running multiple types of scams, right? But one of them is like based on cryptocurrency, and periodically they'll break into one of these
Cryptocurrency exchanges?
Yeah, exchanges, and they'll get a bunch of money, and they don't always get it. They don't always get the, not money, but the crypto. But it's a constant thing, and the United States knows it, and it's obvious, and they can even tell you what building they're in, and they can tell you exactly what's happening and who's on the team, and the whole thing, just like they can with the Chinese. So here's what kills me, and it's the same thing with the Chinese. Well, in a way, I mean, there's theft of intellectual property on the part of China. They blatantly steal it. Like, is there a way to? Let's just stick with the cryptocurrency thing. Is there a way to shut that down? And if so, why doesn't the United States shut it down?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. North Korea funds the majority of their government operations by stealing cryptocurrency or stealing money from overseas. North Korean government is in and of itself a criminal enterprise.
Right.
If you're a North Korean civil servant, part of your job is raising revenue, generating revenue to keep the government going. It's really a fascinating case study. And there's one thing to know that people are out there doing this. There's another thing to be able to stop it, right? If you've got access to the internet, then you've got access to conduct this kind of crime. Let me tell you about, have you heard of cryptojacking? Did we talk about that before?
I mean, I'm not sure of the term.
So I've heard North Korea described as Israel of the dark side, right? They punch way above their weight. Let me tell you about this one thing that they do. Cryptojacking is a derivation of cryptocurrency mining, where you put malware on someone's computer. Now, instead of stealing information or locking the information up and conducting ransom, what you do, you put a program on their computer that uses the slack computing space on their computer to mine cryptocurrency. Right? Every one of us has had where you're working on your computer and it's running a little slow or a little sluggish, and you're like, oh, I've got too many tabs open on top. Or you go into your office at night and the fan is whizzz, and you're thinking, oh, maybe it's just an update. Maybe so. Or maybe you've been infected by North Korean malware and they're using your computer to mine cryptocurrency, to create money, currency, value out of thin air. Millions of computers together. Well, we know this. We know the statistics on it are egregious. Egregious about how often this is happening. Why don't we stop it? Well, all you have to do, update the security on your computer. Stop using Windows 7. Stop, update the patches that are out there. But how do we stop that? As a government, if we know that's happening, why don't we stop it? Well, what do you stop? How do you stop it? You stop the internet? You stop things going back and forth? I mean, in a lot of ways, North Korea is so good because they are finding all these different ways to generate income through theft and through crimes and scam. That was the most recent one. We found out that they're illustrating comics for Amazon or for a couple that HBO or somebody, that North Korean workers are actually conducting work as you'd hire a gig worker on the economy or a Fiverr person or something like that. Well, now the person you hire may be a North Korean, and what are they doing? They're illustrating cartoons.
Right.
Well, technically, that's a violation of sanctions, and you can't employ North Korean labor. But no, they are exceptionally motivated. They are well resourced. They're well equipped. They're smart. Generating income for the regime. It's kind of wild.
Right.
And I don't want anyone to think I admire them. I admire the pluck. I admire their chutzpah to do it. I admire their resilience, their innovation. Obviously we want to crush them, not because we don't like Koreans or, whether you're north or south of the 38th parallel. We just don't like people who are threatening and trying to ransom the world with nuclear weapons. Give up your weapons, come back to the world.
Yeah.
Let's all be cool, man. Look south. Look how awesome that is.
Oh,
all the electricity and food.
Yeah, I was going to say, have you ever seen the pictures at night? It's insane.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
I mean, South Korea is lit up like a Christmas tree, and there's like 4 dots in North Korea.
That's correct.
It's horrific. Like, you don't even have electricity.
Yep.
For the operations, like, how much of it has to be in person, on foot, in the field, as opposed to digital technology, things like that?
This guy, man.
Oh, he's way smarter than me.
This guy. Look, in the old-fashioned day, everything was in person, right? You don't want to do anything impersonally. In today's world, where people live the majority of their lives online, I would say that you wouldn't be wrong to think that there's a blended cyber and human element. I mean, there's always going to be a human element, because at a certain point, I need to look you in the eye I need to ask you a really awkward question, and then I need to be able to put my hand on your knee.
Right.
And say, Matt, it's going to be okay. We're going to be able to do this. And that's really hard to do using an avatar or online.
Right.
But, anyone who's in the industry or in the business would be disproportionately disadvantaging themselves if they weren't using all of the different methods of communication to be in contact with people potentially of interest. So I would just say what percentage. You couldn't really put a percentage on it, but certainly using the full spectrum of communication and interaction would be appropriate these days. I have never talked as publicly about these things as we have.
I've seen a bunch of interviews with you. You've got some interviews on.
Oh no! I've talked publicly.
Yeah.
But I talk about finance, or I talk about cryptocurrency, or I talk about this, or I talk about that. I don't talk about the essence of what we do.
Right.
Right. Now I haven't disclosed anything. I mean, there's no secrets here.
No.
Right. That you couldn't read in a book or you couldn't see or whatever. It's odd for me because it's highly personal.
Right.
Right. Talking about the way I feel about some of these things and talking about the stuff that doesn't convey to the silver screen. Right. But you even saw at one point, the hair on my arms are standing up. This is it's a very personal, intimate thing. And if friends of mine or family of mine listens to this, they're going to hear things they've never heard me say before. And they're my friends and family.
Right.
You didn't ask me about that, right? So while I was active, before I was able to roll my cover back, my parents knew what I did, but my brother and sister did not.
Really?
Yeah. Because they didn't need to. I mean, it would just unnecessarily burden them. Right. And that was a big thing between me and my wife regarding her family and her family's knowledge about what I did. They didn't have a need to know.
Right.
It didn't materially impact their business at all.
What did they think you did?
They thought that I was I won't necessarily get into this part, even though it's ridiculous. Everybody knows. But they just knew that I was a government official that was assigned overseas to our embassy in various places.
Okay.
That's it. And I had a day job. Actually, I had a big day job. I would do all this stuff, and I would have to talk about why what I was doing was so important and how interesting it was. And a lot of times, I'd want to slam my head in the safe drawer because it was so boring. But that's the price of admission to do what we really do. And our job doesn't start until at night or in the mornings or on the weekends.
Right.
Right.
And
so you're doing a normal job, like as a cover-up, basically.
I mean, it would be reasonable to imagine that if you're at a place somewhere, you've got to be able to explain what you do during, to normal people. So yes.
Yeah, I mean, to me, what they always say is like you're working in the embassy or working in some government body for the United States in another in a foreign country, but you take applications for visas, or that's what your cover is, or something like that, or maybe you actually work someplace else that's connected somehow. They get you a job doing something that's whatever, in a hotel or in a whatever, in an engineering store or something, and you're doing something so it makes sense why this guy's in our country, how he's here. He works in an engineering firm, and
stands to reason that you've got to be able to explain why you're living somewhere and how you make your money and all that stuff.
Right.
You can't just say tell you that doesn't
yeah,
that's not helpful.
So while you're doing that, do you still have, like, once you kind of learn like the ins and outs and be able to carry a conversation of what you do you still have like roles and responsibilities that you have to meet in that normal 9-to-5 job, or is that just kind of like, let me work on my stuff?
No. And it all depends, right? It depends, but you could imagine if you have a story that you're doing something in a country, generally you have to do that thing in the country or else it doesn't jive.
Yeah.
That's the other piece that's really funny. It's like, oh man, I just spent 10 hours at work today. Now I get to start my real job.
Yeah, that's
just life. That's just life, and that's just how it works.
Now you, as far as pay is concerned, like compensation, like is that like a bonus added on, or is that already included in your role?
No, there's no. You don't get paid for two jobs. You get paid for your job. No, that's just you just have the opportunity to do a whole nother job.
What is the...
And people usually like it when we're doing the other jobs for them, because we generally are better than the people that they have working for them. We're always, no matter what we do, we're usually pretty good. I mean, and again, not because we're awesome, just because the quality of people that we work with are always pretty high. And so even if my day job is selling water bottles, I'm probably going to be one of your top water bottle salesmen.
Right.
But I don't get any money for that. Right. I still get my same salary.
Nah, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Nah, we got to talk about that. No,
Well, it is what it is. What it is, man. You know, I mean, it's just life.
I was gonna say, did you have family members like, come on, like, are you CIA? Are you FBI? Like,
You know, I'll tell you. I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed to tell you this story.
This is the best stories.
Yeah, you do, right? You do. And I ultimately, peace be upon him, love my dad. But when I originally started, I only wanted to tell my mom because my dad is one of those guys. He's super proud of you.
Yeah.
Right. So he's going to go down to the horse barn and tell his buddies about, whatever. And so I didn't want to tell him. My mom's like, you can't do that to me. You've got to tell him. So I told him, I was like, Dad, you got to, be cool, man. Be cool.
Right.
And, he was always cool. But then like his brother, my uncle was always kind of like, oh yeah, you're really this, that, and the other. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm just a normal. I know you're probably disappointed in me. Hell, I'm disappointed in myself. I'm just a normal this guy. Well, okay, that was bad. But with my wife's family, it was even worse because they were starting to be like, oh, no, we know, and blah, blah, blah. And they're on the phone talking about this when I'm overseas, and that's not helpful at all.
Right.
And so we're back on Thanksgiving, and I brace them bad. And basically, you keep saying he's this, and he's not. He's really this. And he's so proud of being this. And you keep saying that he's that. And you're basically saying what he's doing is not important enough, and it really hurts his feelings. And I had to go through this whole thing about how I was so proud to be in this position. And every time you said I was doing something else, it hurt my feelings. And you're like, oh, man, we feel really bad. We're really sorry. Gosh, you're all right. That is great enough. And then like 15 years later when I was like, nah, I really did this the whole time. They're like, oh, fuck you. I'm like, well, dude, I couldn't have you flapping your sandwich clamp on the phone when I'm overseas.
Right.
What's the matter with you? Of course I'm not douchey like that. No, I'm like this. But come on. Not that first thing's douchey. It's a great avocation for the people that do it. It's just different. It's like saying you play violin or drums. Both are equally pleasurable, but, different. Drums in like Aerosmith, not drums in like, whatever. Anyway.
Listen, like I'm at home all day and I get why are you on your phone? Like, aren't you done working? Can we watch TV? Can we this? Mm-hmm. And you're telling me you're working 40 hours a week and you get home and you're working another, whatever, even if it's 20 hours or 40 hours, another, like how many CIA agents' marriages fail as a result of that? Because that's got to be
CIA officers.
Officers. Come on.
Come on, Matt. You're better than that, man. You're better than that.
Not.
You're better than that. No, because I want you the next time you talk to a guy like me, I want you to be one of those guys that gets it. Officers. I don't know. We always joked about that. Like to be full performance, you either had to have a divorce or have a heart attack or something like that.
Right.
Otherwise you're not really a fully developed officer. I had my heart attack before I actually got divorced. But I think a lot of people probably... I mean, look, it's America. What,
right.
two-thirds of every divorce ends or every marriage ends in divorce. If we factor in all the second and third divorces and all that, it's hard. You've got to have a different kind of relationship because it's not that I'm working 40 hours in one job and then I come home and work 40 hours in another job. It's I work 40 hours in one job and then I go work my other job. I don't come home.
Right.
Yeah,
I can't imagine that.
And now the good news was back when I was doing it, there's no cell phone.
Right.
I'll see you when I see you. These kids today, man, they go on these work trips and they've got to figure out how they're going to manage their social media and how they're going to manage their cell phone. Dude, back in the day, you go on the dark side of the moon. Hey, I'm leaving. I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Oh.
And,
that's not good.
I'll be back when I'm back. And I can't, no. Can you call and check in? No, I can't. That's not the way it works. And so you've got to have a different type of spouse that can put up with that. And a lot of people don't. So it ends in divorce or it ends in people who shorten their careers overseas more quickly because it's really hard on a marriage. There's a reason why a lot of the senior officers in our organization tend to be single people. It's because they're single men. No, it's because they're miserable people who don't have a family and they're so dedicated to the mission. And I can think of 2 or 3 of them. Doesn't mean they're bad people. It's just they've chose to prioritize that over work-life balance.
Well,
so all this nonsense about work-life, there's no work-life balance.
Right.
There's no work-life balance. You've got to believe in your heart that you're doing what you're doing to benefit your family, even if it's and all the other families out there, even if you're doing it at the sacrifice of your own family or your own health or your own whatever. Because that's it. We give it all. You give it all back. You're not doing any of this because you're not getting rich.
Right.
Oh hell, we could make, and I've been proof. You can make 10 times as much money on the outside. And I'd talk to people and I'd be like, you don't work any harder than me. And I'm not really sure you're that much smarter than me, but you just drove up to this meeting in a Bentley and I drove up in a Honda Accord. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Right.
But oh man. But you've got to just be willing to give and give and give and be very selfless to do what we did. And
yeah, I don't think that makes them.
That's the life,
bad.
you know.
I don't think that makes
same for cops and firefighters and military people. There's a lot of people like that. I don't want to say we're unique. I mean, a lot of people like that.
I was gonna say I don't think that makes them bad people. It's just that you're in a job that it's the spouses are like I signed up. I said I'd be okay, but let's face it. After a year or two, it's like, you know what? I can't do this. Like, and it's not that they're bad people, but it's like, hey, you know, my girlfriend, you know, Jennifer. Her husband's home at 5:30 every day. You know, they're going on vacation. Right. They're doing this. She can text them or call them at any time. Like it's got to be like for them. It's just like I just can't do it. You know. Yeah. So it's not that I think that these guys are bad, but you know, and I think everybody has good intentions. You know, when it starts, and then you get 2 years down the road, it's just tough.
Yeah, it's tough, and it's tough, and that's life. And I, you know, as I used to tell my soon-to-be ex-wife, I am what I am. I wouldn't be any different if I was a detective or if I was a lawyer or if I was a doctor. You know, and I think some people, I will say the agency is a tremendous career for workaholics.
Right.
And people who are just insanely, you know, and I don't know, we could say it's undiagnosed adult ADHD or whatever. Everyone wants to label something these days. But that's just the way I was wired. And that's the way people that are really successful are wired. I mean, it's like if you and I are both doing the same thing, and you work for 40 hours and I work for 80 hours, I'm going to be twice as successful as you are, except more because then I'm going to get additional experience. People are always like, well, but it's not fair. We should be at the same position because we both have been in this the same time.
That's not
Bro, you work 9 to 5 and I work 9 to 12.
Right.
And not 9 to noon, you know. Why would it? I was, you know, when I was in the war zone, I can remember at one point we were working about 120, 130 hours a week. And you do the math on that, and you're like, wait a minute, how many hours are there in a week?
Right.
And you're like, yeah, we're sleeping barely, and when we're not, we're working. And I had other people that were in nice, you know, I'm in European Post, and I work 9 to 5, and they're like, hey, why are you getting promoted so fast? I'm like, it's not because I'm smart, and it's not because I'm even any better, but if I'm getting 3 years of experience for every 1 year you're getting, it's just math. Right. It just works out. So anyway, and yes, that has its impact on your relationships, and it's not without cost.
Well, what are you doing now? You're saying you worked for Tesla,
yeah,
and then you left there. So what are you doing now?
I have a private intelligence and security company, and our company, we provide bespoke, discrete solutions for appropriate clients.
What? What you do? You describe what? Just.
You know, it's very clear, Matt. Listen, it's very clear. Let me give it to you one more time. It is very clear. We provide bespoke, discrete solutions for appropriate clients.
I have a fairly good vocabulary. Fairly good.
Listen.
Not the best.
Super clear. You know, on my T-shirt. Yeah, I'm the guy. If you got a thing and you need the guy, I'm the guy that does the thing. You know, my marketing gal doesn't like to say, I used to say, you know, dirty deeds done reasonably priced.
Right.
Or depending on your frame of reference, maybe it's vanilla ice. If you got a problem, we'll solve it. We do a fair amount of work for the government. We do training and support for the government. And then for companies and high net worth individuals that have problems, we solve them.
That sounds ominous, right?
It's not always ominous. Man, one of these, you ought to ask me, we're probably running out of time now, but you'll have to ask me the story about the...
We're not.
When I extorted the extortion guy. But, you know, hey, sometimes people have problems that they need solved that they just need problem solvers to solve. And then you solve their problems. It's like the A-Team, man. We grew up, right? It's like if you can find them, they'll solve your problem. My marketing gal loves me, man. She's like, well, so what kind of marketing you want to do? We're not going to market. What do you mean? I'm like, what do you think? I'm going to put a billboard up? Super Bowl ads?
Right.
No, give me a logo and a name. That's it. I need a website. A lot of dark. How about this blue color? No, I don't like blue. No, it's either black or white. Okay, fine. I'll let you put gray in there. That's it. I don't need any other colors. Do I look like any colors? Colorful guy? Come on.
I knew a guy. So I knew a guy, or I know a guy, but I knew him that if the DEA is looking for a gun runner, or not DEA, it's the DEA, it's drugs. Okay, if the
ATF
ATF is looking for a gun runner, a Brazilian gun runner, and they find out he's in Colombia, but he's good with the government, whatever, they can't go get him. They can't extradite him. He's protected. Then they would put out a whatever saying, look, this guy shows up at a U.S. airport. We'll pay $250,000 for him. We won't ask any questions. And I knew a guy who said, so then 4 guys go to that area. They watch him for a few days. They watch his routine. And then one day they hit him with a taser, throw a black bag over his head, pull him into a van, drive to an airport, put him into a jet, fly him back to the United States, call the DEA and say, hey, we've got, Jose whatever, Gonzalez here, and you've been looking for him, and he said, and then the ATF shows up and they take him away.
Yeah.
And the whole time he's screaming and hollering, I've been kidnapped. But by the time he's here, it's too late. I can't tell you how many guys I met that actually were in their own country. Like they're in Peru or Colombia or something, and they get grabbed. To this day, they can't tell you how they know. They're like, or how they got here. They're like, all I know is that I ended up in New York, and the whole time I screamed and hollered, I was kidnapped. And they were like, yeah, okay, well, we don't know how that happens, but we do know you're here now, and you were indicted 4 years ago, and we can't find you. We couldn't find you until now.
Yeah, I don't do anything like that now.
Okay, now. I said now.
That is everything I do as a private citizen, and our company. Everything we do is legal.
Right.
Right. Everything we do is legal. Now, we could probably have some conversations whether, ethical, whether appropriate amount of reputational risk. And we help clients navigate that. Hey, we want to do this. I appreciate it. You've watched a lot of movies. That's illegal. Right. We're not going to do that. We want to do this. Well, I'll tell you right now that is unethical. And if it came to the light of day, you probably wouldn't want to be associated with that. And then there's all the other things. And we're very upfront. I mean, people have all these crazy notions that we're going to go out and throw a bag over somebody's head or something like that. We don't do any of that kind of stuff. We do other stuff.
But stuff like that happens.
Allegedly. I don't know. If you say so.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's so funny because the first time I was in prison, I heard someone say that. I was like, come on. And, by the 4th or 5th person you hear say that, you're like, this is the thing. Like these guys are this is serious.
Stuff happens, man. It's a weird world. It's a weird world.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel good about this. You feel good about it? You feel
great.
ready?
Yeah.
You feel like anything else? We got, because I don't know what you do, but okay. I thought we were going to get into that, but that's fine.
No, listen. Look.
People talk to me. Sometimes you can help. Sometimes you can't.
That's it. I get calls like, hey, I hear you're a guy. I got a problem. I'm like, well, tell me about your problem. Maybe I'm a guy.
Yeah.
No, and what we do, we do a ton of services. I do want to say, right up front, right? Scams, frauds, impersonation investigations we handle. Privacy issues we handle. If you need to find somebody, we'll find them. If you need to appropriately influence people, we help with that as well. If people are inappropriately influencing you or your families, we help find that and remediate that as appropriate. Yeah. The other thing I really like, I talk a lot about technology. So, I've help out with technical surveillance and things like that. We talk about things like that. Kind of interesting. I've got a show. I'm trying to put together a show. What the Frock, right? Last name's Finfrock. I like the name. What the Frock, little WTF.
Yeah,
what the Frock. We're going to talk technology. And my piece, as you can imagine for me, nothing's ever good or bad, right? Nothing's ever black or white. It's always gray for me. And so we're going to talk about high tech. Like, hey, this newest, greatest robot. Is that good or bad? Threat or opportunity? But we're going to explain it. Artificial intelligence, what is it? And normal people. I always say one of my superpowers, growing up on a farm and not being overly encumbered by education nor intelligence, I can take really complicated topics and break them down so that every man understands them. At least that's what I think I can. I've achieved that feedback.
Yeah, that's what you do with the cryptocurrency thing.
That's it. So we take really complicated topics. We explain them so Joe Sixpack can understand them. And then we talk about the pros and cons. Everything's got pros and cons. I was at Denny's last night. This is a true story. I was at Denny's last night. And I had a little Brenner, whatever. I ordered a little Grand Slam. And this robot delivers it. Zzz, Bear Connect. I'm like, what in the hell is that? I break out my phone. I take some pictures. I take my plate off. It drives back around. I'm like, this is what happens when you want $20 for minimum wage. Okay, fine. I get it. But I'm looking at it. I'm like, how cool. We're going to have to add that on the list of things we're going to talk about. And all that came up. I was with a guy and we were talking about robots as guards. And he's like, that sounds ridiculous. Why would you have a robot guard? I said, well, clearly you've never had a compound that needs guarded. No smoke breaks. No showing up for work drunk. No not showing up. Put a robot on the edge. Get some sensors. Get some cameras. Forget about it. It's what you got. The latest and greatest thing, I'm going to buy one of these robot dogs. Have you seen the robot dogs with the flamethrower?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm totally going to get one of those. Yeah. Why wouldn't you, for crying out loud?
I don't know about the flamethrower part.
No,
I wouldn't want it with a. They don't come with a flamethrower.
Oh yeah, you haven't seen that? $9,400 you can buy a robot dog that looks like the Boston Dynamics dog with a giant flamethrower on the back.
I thought you were just talking about the Boston Dynamics dog.
No, it looks
Boston Dynamics.
No. It's actually from a flamethrower company. They've bought these robot dogs and mounted flamethrowers on the back. It's like 30 feet of flamethrower. I mean, it's incredible. And I'm like, man, if I'm doing well with my company, so here's the decisions I have to make these days, Matt. It's tough. I'm like, am I going to buy a motorcycle or am I going to buy a robot dog with a flamethrower? I'm like, I could expense a robot dog with a flamethrower. I talk about high tech.
Yeah.
We would interview the dog. We would maybe put it on the show. I don't know. I got to start a fire. I want to light my cigar. I don't know. Maybe it's home defense. I don't know. Everyone wants a dog. I think I'd call it Sparky. But yeah, robot dog with a flamethrower. If you haven't seen it, $9,400 could be yours. Somebody asked me the other day, they're like, what would the permitting process be on that? I'm like, bro, do you think anybody who's going to buy a robot dog with a flamethrower is going to ask about what the permitting process is? I wouldn't. Hadn't crossed my mind.
Right.
Because I have a robot dog that shoots flames. You're going to come and check the permit on it? I wouldn't do that. Not in my neighborhood. Jeez.
I was going to say, and you have to go with the dog because lots of people have lots of people have motorcycles. Everybody's got a motorcycle. That's not a big deal.
No. How cool would that be? Robot dog with flamethrower. Knock on my door. I would hook it up with my Ring camera. Maybe. I don't know. No solicitation means no solicitation.
So did you hear, speaking of technology, hear about the Elon Musk? They're rolling out the Teslas. You can buy a Tesla. You can sign it up for an app. And then you can go to work. You leave.
The robot taxi.
Yeah, and it takes off. And so while I'm at work making a few $100s,
right,
it's at work making a few $100s.
Elon's been promising that for years. I have a Tesla. I won't put that thing to work. Absolutely.
Wow, right?
Isn't that cool?
That's amazing. That's yeah. That's that.
We'll see.
You know who despises the idea. Every time we drive by like a burn mark on the street,
yeah,
Jess goes, Tesla.
Like a burn mark?
Like a Tesla. She says, they set on fire.
No, they don't.
That's
false. That's false. We detected and determined that there were several stage videos that showed Teslas catching on fire, which were not true. Not true. Teslas are the safest cars on the road. The weight's in the bottom. They don't roll over. Come on, forget about it.
Listen, she didn't want to hear this.
The crumple zones there. Have you not? I mean, come on. No. And the worst part is someone dies in a Tesla, and they're like, "Oh, man died in Tesla." That's not man killed in car crash.
Right.
So it's that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't get real worked up.
But that's pretty cool, though.
That's awesome.
I love that.
Well, look, you either like.
Did you hear about that?
You either like technology and you're excited about it, or you're not. And for me, hey, look, we want to go to Mars.
Yeah.
There will be high fiving on Mars.
Yeah.
Forget about it. I can't wait. Take my robot dog with the flamethrower.
I got a question now.
Oh my God. Okay. Last question.
Given your background
Uh-oh.
in technology,
Well,
how far?
I'm not a tech guy. I grew up on a farm.
How far or realistic do you think like robot or AI policing or
Oh, as far as we want to make it.
Yeah.
Do you think it's like any like downfalls of it?
Well, I'll tell you. One of the things I love about America and Americans, and really just humans in general, as soon as we create something, the second person to the party breaks it. That's just what we do, right? We had AI, generative AI. We had, what was it called, Tay or something like that. Someone programmed this generative AI to be able to learn from people, and like the day later, it's spewing anti-Semitic, racist tropes that, because people are like, oh wait, it'll say what what I get it to say. It's kind of like when you have a little niece or nephew. Say poop, say
Right.
shit, go tell mommy fuck. Because humans are just funny like that. Now, so, I was talking to a major city police department, and I said, hey, I heard you guys are going to get robot cops here. Like these little robots that go around and, whatever. They're like, yeah, we are, but this is our city, and those things will get the crap kicked out of them in like a half a second. That's why we have all of our security cameras are at 18 feet, because if they're any lower than that, people confuse them with piñatas and beat the crap out of them. They're like, that dog will never hunt here, man. They will roll those robots like a champ. I think for me that there's a lot of things that robots could do for policing. There's a lot of artificial intelligence we could use for policing. The problem is, once you have something like that that's objective, then you've got to live in the objective reality. And you can't blame over-policing, and you can't blame profiling. You can't blame human bias, although you can try. But then things are just the way they are.
Right.
And so I think technology is not what's stopping us from having AI-enabled police and smarter policing. People are what's stopping us. Civil rights advocates and people like that inherently don't trust police. I'm not saying whether I do or don't trust police, although I used to be a cop when I was in the Navy. But that humans are going to slow us down more than the technology. The technology is going to be there very quickly. I mean, because you can tell. I mean, you can just.
It's inevitable.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not going to stop.
Yeah.
I think that, like anything, it's just like the self-driving cars. Like they come out and there's a few issues, and over the next few years they tweak those issues, and then it gets better and better, and before you know it, same thing with if you end up having Android police officers or whatever. Sure, there's going to be a 4, 5, 10 year learning curve where they're going to tweak it to the point where it's damn near perfect.
And I'll tell you too. So I was in a Middle Eastern country, and this Middle Eastern country uses a lot of AI and robotized, if that's a word, robotized policing. And so where in the U.S. do we have most of the law enforcement encounters that go badly, right? Traffic stops. Well, in this particular country, you don't have traffic stops. You're speeding down the road. You get a nice little text on your phone. Good morning from the local police. You've been issued a speeding ticket for this amount. Have a great day.
Right.
And you've effectively done the same thing without the law enforcement interaction that is going to result in some kind of violence. Now, what you miss out on, of course, is that people that are breaking some laws are generally breaking a lot of laws, and until you stop them, they will continue to do it. But I mean, I don't know. I think there's just a lot of things that we could do that would make things safer that don't require a lot of that human interaction. But I don't know. I'm also the guy that I just feel like if I'm driving 100 miles an hour down the highway, hypothetically this morning, I should have a fair shot to beat the cop. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So but yeah, I just I feel like that's American.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, okay. Good question.
All right. You good?
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen.
We good?
We're good. I listen. I appreciate you coming by.
Yeah, of course, man.
Like
it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Told everybody I saw you on stage, and I thought this guy's great. I
mean, I felt like it's just a bunch of like random stories. Is that all right?
No, it's good.
Exactly what.
Yeah, and we got the bulk of how you entered into the CIA, a bunch of fun stories. Like this is good. This is good. Hold on, watch this. This is what you got to do. That's what I do at the end. Okay. Hey, I really appreciate you guys watching. Do me a favor, if you like the video, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you get notified of videos just like this. Please consider joining my Patreon. Share the video. Leave me a comment. Thank you guys very much. And we're going to do you have social media or anything? Do you have anything like that? Links?
LinkedIn or whatthefrock.com is my...
Oh, okay. We're going to leave a bunch of links in the description. I appreciate it. See ya.